of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk, the home of common sense, of course. Whether or not you are watching on your YouTube or on your connected device, listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, it's great to have your company. I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock, and lots coming up in this hour. In fact, throughout the show, we're going to be discussing Keir Starmer and his meeting with Donald Trump in the White House later today. It's going to be about 5 o'clock UK time when we first see the two men together. But Starmer has warned President Trump that Russia will come again unless the US provides security guarantees to European soldiers stationed in Ukraine as part of a potential peacekeeping force after a ceasefire. This comes, I say, ahead of that meeting. We'll see what happens there. Meanwhile, just a day after Keir Starmer announced that boost to the military budget, not as much, it turns out, in real terms as what he'd actually initially said, but the Prime Minister refused repeatedly at PMQs yesterday, and his Defence Secretary John Healey refused repeatedly on the radio this morning to rule out that a significant chunk of that increase would be spent on the government's Chagos surrender deal. We'll talk about that as well. Plus, Gary Lineker's back in the news. Never for the right reason, is it? Gary Lineker, those joined 650 other pro-Palestinian media figures. They're exactly the people you would expect them to be, in criticising the BBC for the decision of the BBC finally to pull a documentary about Gaza, despite the fact the documentary was blatant propaganda and narrated by the son of a Hamas official, which presumably the cameraman who helped film the documentary, who celebrated October the 7th massacre, probably knew. Anyway, it cost us, what, 400 grand of our taxpayers' money? Yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Plus the latest immigration statistics that show that 108,000 people claimed asylum here in the UK last year. It was 18% more than in 2023. And it's higher even than the recorded peak back in 2022, which was 103,000 people. There's also more people now housed in hotels as asylum seekers than there were the year before last. 38,000 people who've come here, claimed asylum on their small boats and otherwise, who we're now putting up in hotels. 44,000 people arrived, irregular arrivals. Call them illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants who came to this country illegally arrived in 2024. That is almost a fifth higher than the previous year. So, smashing those gangs is really working, isn't it, Prime Minister? And the previous Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, really did stop those boats. I mean, what an abject failure. Anyway, all of that coming up, plenty to talk about. Joining me for all the chat, you will be delighted to learn, is Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Is anything happening around the world?
I know, genuinely, we say this every day. It is that thing, though, sometimes you go, oh, gosh, I don't know what
there's nothing going on.
I don't know what the real news is. We're like, oh, yeah, there's plenty to talk about. I mean, we could do, I've got to be honest with you, we could do all 3 hours on any one of those shows, those topics.
Easy.
Quite happily, fill the time. We wouldn't need a guest, just you and me, quite happily putting the world to rights. We should do that sometime. But let's start with what's happening today. So Keir Starmer is already in Washington. He's been with Mr. Slimy Pants himself, Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, who's now, for some bizarre reason, our man in Washington in the embassy. He's going to be meeting with President Trump later today. So basically, he's going to have meetings. There's going to be some on camera. There's going to be private meetings. There's going to be a lunch. It's all happening at American time, obviously. It's going to be 5 o'clock and the rest early evening for us here in the UK. But what the question I'm putting to our audience today, and I'll give you the numbers to call on before I get Philip's response, but what do you want the result to be from Keir Starmer and Donald Trump's meeting at the White House? Do you want a security guarantee for Ukraine? Do you want some sort of deal, whether it's on tariffs? Do you want the Chagos surrender treaty to be vetoed, as we understood from the Foreign Secretary yesterday, that it could be by the US, and quite rightly? Do you want more help for Ukraine? I want to know what you want to hear from Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, what you hope that they will agree at the White House today. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. So I kind of double-headed this one to you, Philip. What do you want them to do and agree? And what do you think they will do and agree?
Well, that's a difficult one, because you can't really predict anything with Donald Trump, and especially whenever he's not up against an alpha character, which there's no way you can describe Keir Starmer as that.
I mean, he's beta minus, isn't he?
Well, exactly. He's going to be dominated. So what do I want? I want Trump to sink the Chagos deal, because it makes no sense from a military perspective, from a geopolitical perspective, from an economic perspective. There is no logic behind it whatsoever.
And especially as it does appear, they won't deny, which is basically that some of the money for this defence boost is going to pay Mauritius, ally of China, to rent back a defence base that the US and the UK already own in the Chagos Islands.
Exactly,
insane.
And it's strategically critical for security in the region. The Chinese are already making manoeuvres to position themselves to exploit any opportunities.
I mean, what a surprise!
Yes, of course, and the Chinese are pushing very hard behind it. So I hope he'll sink that. I hope what he'll do is turn around to Keir Starmer and say, right, 2.5%, brilliant, tick, well done for doing that. But 2027, you need to be looking at that quicker, and actually you need to be looking at the 3% and possibly more even quicker. And let's open a relationship between the UK and the US from a defence industrial base, and tie that into then no tariffs to the UK on wider manufacturing.
Wait, no, sorry, is that code for we'll spend a lot of taxpayers' money to order a load of military hardware from America, in return can we not have tariffs and other goods? Is that what you said?
Sort of, but a lot of the big defence companies, your BAE Systems is a British company, but it's got a huge base in the United States and provides the United States military with an awful lot of their capability. We benefit from that. The F-35 fighter that is manufactured, we manufacture a good percentage of that aircraft.
Right.
Now, the thing that we have to balance off is that if at some stage in the future the US may provide a red flag and say you can't use the kit that's got US technology in it in operations, and that's something we have to be very careful
of. Some sort of deal there. Okay.
So those.
And what about Ukraine?
And Ukraine.
I'm surprised you haven't mentioned Ukraine first.
Well, Ukraine. It's really difficult to work out why Donald Trump is taking the position he's doing. And I've just started reading his book, The Art of the Deal, because a few people.
He didn't write it.
I know he didn't write it, but he'll have talked to someone, and it's his verbiage that's been regurgitated in the book. But a few people have said that if you look at what he's doing at the moment with Russia, in that book he says you bring in your hardest potential partner in offering them anything, giving them something just to get them on the line, reel them in, and once you got them in the keep net or the landing net, then you give them the reality and a dose of reality. Right. I hope that's what he's going to do with Putin.
Oh my goodness, so do I.
Well,
again, my big hope was I think again on balance, I think Donald Trump was a better option. I would have voted for him. I loved a lot of the stuff he's done on wokeism and on government efficiency and Doge and the like. Really like his stance on Israel. But I remember thinking when it comes to world affairs, I'm like, we've got to choose between Israel and Ukraine at this point because both of these. But again, I don't understand how anybody. I really don't understand how anybody with any morality or sense of right and wrong or understanding of history could be on the side of Hamas over Israel. Yeah. That just blows my mind. But there are those people. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
But I also don't understand how someone on the same logic isn't on the side of Ukraine against Russia. Yeah. But then we've got Donald Trump constantly saying, my friend Vladimir Putin. He's talking about Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, his good friend. Yesterday, he wouldn't even give a firm commitment to preventing Taiwan being taken by force. Not even like in any way, but by force by China. And he wouldn't comment on it. Now, I mean, this is getting really worrying. I can't imagine there are a lot of Republicans in the American Congress who and a lot of Trump's aides who aren't going, hold on a minute there.
He's playing a very dangerous geopolitical game here. Putin will want to eke out any form of ceasefire or reduction in what's going on the front line as quickly as possible so that he can rebuild his military. He's already got plans to do that. Some very, very good interviews around on different platforms. Yeah. One in particular from General Budanov, who's the head of the Ukrainian HUR, the military intelligence. He's the one that's leading the Ukrainian attacks into Russia and everything else. And he's probably the one senior Ukrainian who's got most sense, and he's saying Russia's not going to stop until it gets its empire back, and part of that empire is not just having Belarus as a puppet state, but it wants the whole of Ukraine as a puppet state, and then it wants the old Soviet states back again, and it's going to keep going to do that.
I don't know why everyone's confused about what Putin's aims are. He literally spells them out, and his aides spell them out. I don't understand why anyone is under any illusions.
And these comments on Taiwan, if Putin is allowed to keep any territory inside Ukraine by taking it by force, Xi Jinping is going to go, well, they'll let me come back and into the international fold, and Trump has just made it even.
What about this? This mineral deal? Some question marks about whether actually there are enough minerals. Certainly in the parts of Ukraine in the Donbass region which are still held by the Ukrainian forces, whether there are enough minerals there for this deal. It's gone from being a $500 billion demand to far less. $1 trillion. It's still in the billions, hundreds of billions. But there's some thought that if there was a mineral deal, and we still understand that Zelensky is planning to travel to the US and will be at a meeting with Donald Trump on Friday, that some sort of deal. Well, if there were American mining companies there, then that would require Americans sort of offer some sort of guarantee. It's clear that Keir Starmer and the French and probably the Germans too, offering to have a peacekeeping force in Ukraine, but not sort of on the front line, not talking between North Korea and South Korea, but just in the country, but wanting that backstop of US guarantee that if anything happens, the US step in, effectively giving a sort of NATO support, not to Ukraine, but NATO support to the European NATO members' forces that are in Ukraine. Some sort of guarantee. It just doesn't look like we're going to get that either. Donald Trump is basically going, this is a European problem, it's not my problem. But our understanding on that was always that American presidents, last one as well, turning away from Europe, focusing on the Pacific, not the Atlantic relationships. But then if he's not even going to be defending Taiwan, then who is he going to help look after? And again, this is not about the goodness of American, charity. This is about national interests of America.
Yeah, if he gets this wrong and Xi Jinping goes into Taiwan, the economic shock that we felt with Russia going into Ukraine 3 years ago will seem like small change. Yeah. It's small change. The mineral deal is interesting, and some of the issues behind the minerals. China controls about 90% of the output of world's rare earth metals. Yeah. Everything we have, all of our technologies, everything relies on rare earth metals, and China's got this cornering of the market. One of the big things, and some of the mines haven't even been opened inside Ukraine. The deposits are there, but one of the big things, a simple one, lithium for all of the batteries and things. China produces the majority of the lithium that comes out of the world, but it doesn't mine it. It's mined in Australia and elsewhere, brought into China for processing. They've got the processing plants. The United States has got one lithium processing plant and isn't bringing stuff in. Guess who owns it? Elon Musk and Tesla.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, conspiracy theories?
Well, yeah, hey, I've no doubt at all people are making money out of this. I mean, people do, but I mean, 'twas ever thus. 'Twas ever thus. I mean, you know, Hunter Biden in meetings in Ukraine. I mean, with, you know, Mr. X drug addict, what skills do you have?
Exactly.
Why are you on the board of a big mining company in Ukraine? I'd love to hear from you. Really would love to hear your thoughts. What do you want the result to be from Keir Starmer and Donald Trump's meeting at the White House today? What are your hopes? What are your fears? What do you think will happen? Very different questions, are they not? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And let's go back to Chagos, though. Repeatedly, PMQs and the Health Secretary, the Defence Secretary today, sorry, absolutely blankly refusing to deny that some of the money that were announced extra for defence, not 13.4 billion, in real terms it'll be 6 billion more than we were already going to spend anyway by 2027, that some of that will go on the Chagos surrender. And I think Chagos surrender deal is the correct thing. We own the Chagos Islands, Mauritius has no claim on them. Some stupid court in the past has said, oh, an advisory decision, we think that, you know, I mean, reparations here, reparations there, give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. They've never owned it, they've never had any say over it. It's absolute abject nonsense. It's mad policy of anyone even to discuss. People should say, go away, get out of my face, this is a nonsense. We have a very vital strategic military base joint with the US on Diego Garcia, which is on the Chagos Islands, and it looks like we are going to be paying for the privilege of leasing that while the Chinese get their clause in, close allies of Mauritius. Donald Trump, we're told, has a veto, the Foreign Secretary said yesterday, because, it's an American defence base. If they're not willing to play, it's not happening. Do just hope that there will be some sanity today, and Donald Trump will say, yeah, that's not happening.
I do. Or, Keir Starmer gives it to the Americans. That would be a much better deal for...
Don't give it to anybody, it's ours.
We don't need to, and we don't get anything back from the Americans for it. So he could tie in the Americans renting it from us. But this is ridiculous. An extra 6 billion over and above what we were going to spend anyway on defence. The Chagos deal is front-loaded. So for the first few years of defence expenditure going up to 2.5% of GDP, nothing's going to go to the Ministry of Defence. So there's going to be no...
Buy new planes, train new soldiers.
Yeah, exactly. No improvement in capability whatsoever. This is crazier than crazy.
This is smoke and mirrors stuff. Yeah. This is a terrible thing. And the thing is, the threat is real.
Very real.
The threat is real. We can see that again. We couldn't defend ourselves, right? Let alone Ukraine. Oh, let's send a peacekeeping force to Ukraine. We don't have enough soldiers to fill Wembley Stadium. Yeah, let's send peacekeeping forces.
Well, Private Jones from One Welsh Guards has said he might be able to make himself available if he's let off guard.
Yeah, I just find it absolutely terrifying. I really do. Let's talk about the latest immigration stats, though, that came out this morning at 9:30. 108,000 people claimed asylum in 2024. That's 80% more than the year before. Of course it is. And it's even more than the peak in 2022. Things did actually go down again in 2023. I mean, the boats ain't been stopped. The gangs ain't been smashed. 44,000 illegal migrants. This awful term, irregular arrivals. Illegal migrants were found, detected in 2024. That's up a fifth, more on the previous year. Asylum seekers in hotels that you and I are paying the bills for. It's 2,500 more in December than it was in July when Labour came to power. Although it's 38,000, it's below the peak of 56,000 the year before. I mean, throwing these numbers at you. Basically, things aren't getting any better than the year before, but they're mostly not as awful as they were in 2022. That's kind of immigration policy. It's just not quite as awful as it might have been. That's kind of our best case scenario now.
It's crazy. There should be a complete revolving door of people come into this country, they go into a holding centre. From that holding centre, they're bussed to an airport, they're put in an aircraft and dropped back into either the country that they came from, and if we can't do that, they go to another country that we've got to...
Don't let them set foot in the country in the first place.
Rwanda, yes.
Yeah, I don't care where they go, they're not my problem.
Yeah,
they're just,
exactly.
I'm sorry, I'm just not
even... Just get rid.
Done. We're done now. I think most of Europe is done now. And again, this government and the last government, you can fail to deal with it, but I'm telling you, British people are not putting up with that anymore. Yeah. We are done. Thank you very much. Yeah. I'm amazed, actually. I've got very good friends of mine who, lifelong Labour, heartland Labour people. They've got, people in the last Labour cabinet, good friends of theirs. They're full-on Labour people. And they are saying, we need mass deportations at this point. Now, if people like that are saying things like that, then I'm sorry, things have changed.
The winners, Nigel Farage and Reform.
Yeah, every time.
And
every time.
I think the local elections, which some of them have been postponed, the local elections will send a shockwave through the government. If it doesn't, the government is blind and daft.
Yep, absolutely. Can I also, in terms of blind and daft, Gary Lineker, hello, love. Gary Lineker, Anita Rani and Miriam Margolis. I mean, basically, the usual suspects. They're among 650 of the typical usual suspect media figures, your Ken Loaches, your Mike Lees and others. 650 of them who's criticised a BBC decision to pull a controversial documentary about Gaza. It was basically, to all intents and purposes, Hamas propaganda. It featured the son of a Hamas government minister, an official, which they must have known. It was filmed by a cameraman who'd celebrated October the 7th, cost you and me, the taxpayer, with our licence fee, those of you who still bother paying it, 400 grand. How? I mean, really? What are the costs of filming in Gaza? And basically, it was only after it was exposed having, just clear propaganda elements. Clearly, things like the continuity. Oh, this kid runs into this hospital, the kids leave. Oh, but he's wearing different shoes 3 times in the space of an hour. Different haircut. Clearly, any editor who had like a minute's experience would have looked at this video and gone, this isn't right, this isn't dodgy, we can't put this out. It's not news reporting, this is propaganda. But now, people, it got pulled eventually after this criticism was raised. Now, extraordinarily, these people are complaining. Gary Lineker is complaining, saying this is censorship.
How can it be censorship with this propaganda? It's not a documentary. It's not balanced. It's not producing a neutrally but informed argument, putting both sides and showing a reality.
No, but I don't mind if it only did one side. If it said this is one side of the argument, but it was factually incorrect.
Yeah, correct. So it is pure propaganda. The young host was directly linked to Hamas. The cameraman celebrated October the 7th. Hamas are the only people that can approve any output that goes out of Gaza, and therefore will have had to approve what filming went on and elsewhere. Otherwise, the individuals would have got shot.
I do just find it absolutely extraordinary. These people are still doubling down despite all the evidence. Again, Gary Lineker, still looking forward to your comments about that baby and that toddler both being murdered, strangled to death. We understand the Bibas family in Gaza, in those Gaza tunnels after being taken hostage, with their mother and their father as well, also taken hostage but released some months ago. But still waiting for your comments on that. But oh no, you're really upset about a documentary that's Hamas propaganda being removed, but not so bothered about kids being strangled. It tells just a lot about you, doesn't it, Gary? It tells us a lot about you. Anyway, 10:22 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on what you hope to hear, what you expect to hear, what you fear to hear after that Trump meeting with Keir Starmer. How will it go? Love to hear your thoughts. So 344 499 1000. Plenty more to come. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
Yeah, we're not talking about defence and military expenditure, but I think his speech yesterday was weak, pathetic, certainly not enough, wrong timeline, and actually mendacious, because he was actually talking about figures that he was manipulating figures, massaging the figures. The actual sort of fiscal benefit to the defence budget isn't anything near what he's trying to make out.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:25 is the time. Philip Ingram is still with me. We're going to take your calls in just a couple of moments, but it's time right now to find out how you could be with a chance of winning £25,000.
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. But time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Good afternoon, good morning, welcome back again. I hope good luck in that competition. 10:26 is the time. Let's go straight to your calls. Malcolm is on the line. He's in Oxford and wants to tell us, well, what he hopes to be the result, what he thinks will be the result of that meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump this afternoon in the White House. So, Malcolm, what do you make of it?
Well, this is how I would like to see it, and good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Keir comes into the Oval and says, Donald Trump says, "Hi there, Keith, sit down, take a seat. First of all, I'm going to fix your foundations. You're going to drill, baby, drill. That's what you're going to do. I'm not interested what you are going to say about the Ukraine, because I'm the one that's been funding it. Now, Mr. Starmer, you don't mind me calling you Mr. Starmer, do you? The next thing, have a look at your people, what they're going through. You've just put up your energy prices by another 6.4%. That's a third time. And yet you've still got gas, you've still got oil in that North Sea, but you won't touch it. Mr. Starmer, Prime Minister Starmer, also, while I'm going to tell, get rid of Millipede. He's killing your country. For goodness sake, Keith, get on with it. Fix those foundations. By the way, Keith, if you don't do something, you're going to get a 25% tariff on everything that you send to us. No, Mr. Starmer, you're going to learn a lesson. You do not take the mickey out of me and fly balloons over London when I'm coming over to see the Queen.
Wow. I tell you what, to be fair, the accent came and went, but I'm loving it. It's probably what he would like to say. What do you think will happen, Malcolm?
Well, I think that Donald Trump, President Trump, who I have actually emailed, asking him, begging him to put a stop on this Chagos deal.
Yeah. Do you think he'll veto the Chagos deal?
Well, he'd be a fool if he don't.
He would be. He does do a lot of foolish things, though, does he not? What do you think? And what do you reckon on Ukraine? Do you think, because that's the real focus for this meeting, which is basically, will the US provide some sort of security guarantee ahead of any possible ceasefire deal to Ukraine? What do you want him to do there?
I think that we don't know the full facts of what's going to be in the deal when he meets with the president.
What would you like to be in the deal?
I'd like to see America forcing the Europe, the EU and Britain to raise their defence budgets and to do more for Ukraine, to stop it, not just leave it to the Americans. I'd like to see Donald Trump get a peace deal, and like everything, it's a peace deal. There's always a deal when it comes to ending a war. Otherwise, it's a winner and loser.
Well, I'd like there to be a winner. I'm old-fashioned. I'd like the sovereign democratic state that was invaded to be the winner, but it doesn't have to be a deal. If the West supported Ukraine enough. Malcolm, really good call. Thank you very much indeed. Philip, your reaction?
Malcolm, the scriptwriter. You could write a very good script for a parody.
I've got to be honest with you. As serious as all this is, I would dearly love Donald Trump to call him Keith.
Oh, that would
make me laugh so much. That would be even for the national community. Because there's an element where, like, whether you vote for someone, whether you like someone or not, or admire them, at the end of the day, he's representing our country. I need him to be treated with respect, because that's about treating this nation and our people with respect. So I do expect that, and they often have a bit of a love-in, don't they? I mean, you know that Keir Starmer absolutely loathes Donald Trump. He's everything that he sort of stands against, but and vice versa. But it'd be interesting to see. Another call on the line, 0344 499 1000 is the number for you to call any time to have your say on any of the topics. And it's Khalid in Leicester. And Khalid, I understand you want to talk about the Gary Lineker criticising the BBC for pulling basically a Gaza, Hamas propaganda documentary.
Thing is, Julia, you stated earlier that I can't believe anybody would be on the side of Hamas. The reality is, it's not about Israel against Hamas.
Yeah, it is.
Listen, Israel want to take over the whole of the land. In the Likud party charter, it states categorically that there will only be Israeli sovereignty from the river to the sea. And even Netanyahu, May 2023, he held up, everybody's seen it, he held up the map saying this is a greater Israel with no Palestinians on the land. So this plan has been there for decades, the Yinon plan, or Y-I-N-O-N, look it up, the Yinon plan. This plan is documented, open for everybody to see. This has always been the plan for them to...
So I don't know why you've got a problem with this, because you clearly don't have a problem with from the river to the sea for the Palestinians, but why did Israel withdraw in 2005 from Gaza then? They were quite happy to withdraw. They're like, fine, leave it to the Palestinians.
Leave it to the Palestinians, but no air, land or sea.
Sorry, are you angry with have you taken it up with the Egyptians? For some reason, the Egyptians decided to close their border with Gaza. I don't know why. I don't know why they didn't want loads of Palestinians from Gaza coming into their country.
Why should the Palestinians leave? Would you leave your home just for the sake?
No, I mean leave, but no. You're saying no land. I'm saying no. People were able to freely pass. In fact, Palestinians were able to get into work in Israel. In fact, some of them were the people who were basically working as spies in the kibbutz to basically give information to Hamas about where they could kidnap and kill people on October the 7th. No, I'm saying no. There's plenty of routes into Gaza. Egypt chose not to provide any at all. So presumably you've got the same criticism of Egypt.
The point is, Israel is controlling the borders. There's no two ways.
No, Israel does not control the border between Gaza and Egypt. Egypt controls that border.
And besides, the problem we have here, many other governments surrounding, they've been bought out. 80 billion pounds America pays Egypt. Mm-hmm. They pay to Jordan. So many of the it
wasn't Egypt's choice to close their border.
Julia, Julia, even here, there's many MPs who are paid by friends of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they are.
They're paid by. They're paid by. Are they? Is it all documented?
Even yourself, Murdoch is a hardcore Zionist friend. Right, and
wait. So because my employer happens to support the same stance on this, I don't think he supports some of my stances or all of my stances. But you think that's why I say what I say? You think I don't actually believe what I say?
I believe you don't care about what happens to the Palestinians.
No, it's Hamas that doesn't care about what happens to Palestinians. Hamas celebrates Palestinian children sacrifice themselves, and they absolutely love children dying as martyrs. That's their shtick. That's what they get off on. It's Hamas that doesn't care about Palestinian people.
If somebody came into my house, Julia, and started, shot any of my family member and wanted to terrorise me, do you think I would just sit there and say, well, it happens, just take it? Of course you would.
You're talking about Israel on October the 7th, or you're talking about Palestine?
I'm talking about decades and decades of Bukhari. Even before Hamas were around, you know this, and you know the facts, Julia. So don't pretend you don't know. The Palestinians have been massacred and brutalized for decades, even before Hamas were there in existence.
Yeah, I hate to tell you, every single war that Israel has been involved with has been started by another organisation or another country. And by the way, Israel has won every single one of those battles. Funny that, isn't it? Just get back. Let's get back to the subject at hand. I'm going to have to go to break very quickly because we've gone on too long. on here. I've got a guest waiting. But you're saying they're not on the side of Hamas. When Gary Lineker and his little mates, as Anita Rani and Miriam Margolis and all the usual pro-Palestinian suspects, when they said that the BBC shouldn't have pulled a documentary on Gaza, which was basically Hamas propaganda, it was clearly not a proper journalistic editorial, it was Hamas propaganda. Why do you think that they're right and I'm wrong?
Because you don't have a consistency in application of any journalism, Julia. The point is, when Israel push their propaganda, you support it 100% to the hill.
What propaganda do I support from Israel?
Of course.
What propaganda do I support from Israel?
Everything that comes out of the Israeli spokespeople, you agree with 101%.
If I agree with what they've said, then I agree with them. If I don't agree with them, I don't. I mean, for instance, I don't agree with the West Bank settlements. I've made that very clear. I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu is a good man or a good leader. I'm very critical, actually, of the Israeli government on a number of aspects of their policy.
That's just the point. You say he's not a good leader. The point is he's a war criminal. Forget saying he's not a good leader. That's too subtle. You should say what he is.
I don't think he is. If I thought he was a war criminal, I'd say I thought he was a war criminal. I don't believe he's a war criminal. I think he's the active opposite of a war criminal.
Invite him to your house, have a cup of tea, and blend in with him. Then you know what I mean? Because he's one of the worst people.
I would rather have a cup of tea with Benjamin Netanyahu than I would with a Hamas leader.
You'd be surprised. Speak to Alexander. Speak to the hostage. Speak to the hostage who's just been released, Alexander Turbanov. He's just been released. Ask him what he thinks. He was there for 498 days.
The prisoner.
Ask him exactly.
The prisoner.
Alexander Turbanov, one of the hostages who's just been released a few days ago. Speak to him.
The Israeli hostage.
Israeli hostage.
Right, the Israeli hostage.
Don't take it from me. Speak to him. He's just been released a few days ago. Get him on air, and we'll have an interview with him for 1 hour and see what he says.
Here's the difference. In Israel, whether you're a former hostage or not, in Israel, you're allowed to criticise the government. And you know what happens? You don't get killed for doing that because it's a democratic state. Very, very different from what happens within Gaza. Now, look, it's 10:36. I'm going to have to go to a break. I'm 6 minutes late. Khalid, always welcome your calls. I think you're always wrong, but always welcome hearing your views. Khalid in Leicester there. 10:36, I say it's time. We're going to take a quick break. They're going to talk to Matthew Bryser, former White House Department of and State Department official, about what he thinks is going to happen between that Trump meeting between Donald Trump and Keith Starmer. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:38 is the time. Let's try and find out what our next guest thinks is going to happen in the White House later today when Donald Trump meets with Keir Starmer in the Oval Office. Matthew Bryser is a former White House and senior State Department official working in the Obama administration and joins us once again. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, Julia. Nice to be back with you.
Lovely to talk with you. So, OK, I mean, various different questions. What do you think is going to happen today in relation to Ukraine, Chagos Islands? We've got Taiwan seems to be back on the cards after a failure to commit to defending Taiwan yesterday, and indeed mineral deals. I mean, Chagos Islands. Just what do you think? First of all, what do you think is going to happen in terms of a security guarantee of any sort for Ukraine?
Well, Trump said yesterday he doesn't think he'll have to offer, or the United States has to offer, quote unquote, very much of a security guarantee. So he sort of fudged it, but his position is clearly that Ukraine is a European problem. And, it's time to break 80 years of sort of tradition of the U.S. being the security supplier of last resort for Europe, and Europe take this on. So, he's got a completely new paradigm of foreign policy, which is that people like myself, who, old Cold Warriors who grew up with a security paradigm, that's in the past. And now it's going to be transactional diplomacy on the basis of business deals. And so that's the security. Security is the business interconnection.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We understand. We say, oh, he's a successful businessman. In fact, actually, he's not a very successful businessman. He started off with hundreds of millions, and if you put it on the stock market, he'd have more money now than he has now. I mean, it's just, there we are. That's the irony. But he's got this idea, and again, he always seems to think that that deals are, it's zero sum. If I'm happy, you have to be unhappy. In fact, most great negotiators know you have a win-win. The only people he ever seems to want to do that with is dictators like Vladimir Putin or Kim Jong-un or Xi Jinping, which is very bizarre, rather than his allies. Now, we understand American presidents have for a long time been sort of pivoting away from focusing on their transatlantic relationships with Europe and focusing on the Pacific relationships, looking at what's going on in Asia. That's where the booming economies are. That's where the threat from China is. A much bigger issue for America than, frankly, what goes on in Ukraine. And we understand that. And I've always thought that Europeans need to spend more and take more responsibility for their own security, not rely on not the American government, but American taxpayers to fund our security. But in terms of him offering any sort of guarantee to Ukraine, we're told that Zelensky is going to turn up tomorrow, and apparently there's a meeting in London over the weekend with Zelensky and the other European leaders coming to meet with Starmer, where they're going to sort of put together some sort of plan after this apparent mineral deal on Friday. If there is no security guarantee of any sort or any meaningful sort from Trump, why on earth would Ukraine do any deal with them whatsoever, and why would we support any such deal?
Yeah, I think they won't. They won't do it. I mean, if you look at what's on the table right now, it's a framework and it's vague, and all the nitty-gritty important details are to be negotiated later, like who would actually own the resources, how would the dividends, if any, be distributed. That's all in the future. So Zelensky is committed really to nothing. He's just placating Trump at this point. And I think there's no way he's going to say yes unless there's a security guarantee. But what could that look like? I mean, I do know Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron have talked about European troops on the ground behind the front lines. What they say they need now from the United States is a logistical support, meaning airlift, which the rest of NATO doesn't have, and air defense. And, Trump, I don't think he thought this through very much yet. I know that the normal decision-making policy processes are not in place yet. I know 100% based on my friends that are there in the White House. So Trump is, shooting from the hip. And I think he may shoot from the hip in the future if he gets a deal with Zelensky on this framework. And maybe we'll be able to listen to Starmer and say, okay, the U.S. doesn't have to provide the so-called backstop. So it's not decided yet.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, again, we've got, isn't it $200 billion worth of frozen Russian assets in European banks? I mean, let's pay America with that. Here you go. We're taking it from Russia. You're never getting it back. Tough. And give that to America. We'll pay for the security that way, if that's what's necessary. But one of the things that's so striking is you say, you almost passed casually over. The Europeans don't have this airlift capacity. We don't have this air security capacity. I mean, why don't we? I mean, we've just had this announcement from our Prime Minister of an uplift in defence spending, which is a drop in the ocean. Some of it apparently is, well, they won't deny it, so we have to assume it's what's going to happen. It's going to be paying the Mauritians to take our own Chagos Islands off our hands against all of our military and other interests. It is absurd that Europe cannot defend itself without that American backing. It's something that Donald Trump called out in his first term in office, and quite rightly so.
Oh, I think he's completely right about this. Europe, got comfortable. I mean, he's right that we were treated sort of as suckers. We were going to foot the bill. Well, why should the Europeans? There's another piece, though, too, that defense policy and weapons programs are something that nation states and in Europe really kind of protect for themselves, and they want to have some degree of autonomy. So I ran a think tank in Tallinn, Estonia for a few years. And you'd think the three Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, would want to work together on weapons development and procurement, right? They had shared history. They were colonized by the Russians, but they still to this day cannot. Each one wants to have their own program. So that's the second part of the problem in Europe.
Absolutely. And just finally, can I ask you about the Chagos Islands? Because we understood from the Foreign Secretary here, David Lammy, that the Americans do have a veto on that Chagos Islands deal. No one with any sense at all in this country can make head nor tail of why we're doing this Chagos surrender deal just because some stupid court decision from some idiot judges 5 years ago decided that there was on an advisory basis we should hand over our territory to another sovereign territory in cahoots with the Chinese. I mean, it's utterly absurd. Is it likely that Donald Trump will veto that? Because the idea of having a very strategically important joint British and American military base in the middle of the Indian Ocean that's been crucial for some of those, those Gulf forays, to have that and have the Mauritians have any say over it, and to have the Chinese getting access close to it, it seems to me to be something that the Americans would never put up with.
Yes, so I don't know that this is on his agenda yet. I mean, it hasn't really entered into the U.S. political lexicon, but it should, because as you said, this was an advisory position by the International Court of Justice. Just advisory. And by the way, I mean, UK position has always been that the ICJ does not apply to, the Commonwealth, which makes sense because these are sort of internal issues.
Yeah, but also, America's not signed up to the ICJ.
No, of course not. Or the criminal court. So if Prime Minister Starmer can make the compelling point to Trump that, we've got this special relationship in Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, joint nuclear capable base, that neither the Chinese nor anyone else can approach. Why give that up? Trump is going to go crazy and say, damn right, why you can't give that up.
Yeah.
So Trump will be happy to veto it, but it's got to get on his agenda.
Absolutely. Well, we'll probably have to Google it like the rest of us did when it came into the news and find out where the darn thing is. Always good to talk to you, Matthew Bryser, former White House senior official. Thank you very much indeed. Philip Ingram, your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. You asked the question why Europe hasn't got this strategic airlift and all the rest of it. It's because the only nations in Europe that have got any form of what's called power projection capability, the ability to take up a military force and take it somewhere, are the UK with a significant bit, France. But France even relied on the UK to provide helicopters for some of their operations in Africa.
They've got more aircraft carriers, haven't they?
No, they've got only one aircraft carrier, so we've got more aircraft carriers.
They were able to do more when it came to Libya, I remember, than we were able to do.
They did, and supported by the Italians who've got an aircraft carrier. But Italy doesn't spend 2% of its GDP on defence, so it's not there. So Europe isn't used to picking stuff up and taking it anywhere, so it doesn't have any of the strategic enablers, the airlift, the logistics, the strategic lift, the intelligence support that they need, the air defence, the ability to project air power.
Well, we better hurry up and get it, is my suggestion. 10:47 is the time. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts. What do you want the result to be from that meeting between Trump and Starmer at the White House today? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to be talking about the latest immigration statistics and the depressing reading once again. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. 10:49 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram is still with me as well. We've already been discussing some of these latest immigration statistics that have come out. Let's talk right now about them to Ben Habib. He's a former MEP and former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Good morning to you, Ben.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Latest immigration stats. I mean, things we always know they're bad news. They're never good news, are they? Let me run through them very quickly. There were 44,000 what we call now irregular arrivals. Illegal immigrants, 44,000 illegal immigrants detected in the whole year of 2024. It's up a fifth on the previous year. 37,000 of those were on small boats. Bearing in mind, by the way, we don't catch all of these people. Not everyone is identified. 108,000 people claimed asylum in 2024. 18% more than the year before, and it's even higher than the peak we had in 2022. Asylum seekers in hotels, well, the peak was back in 2023 when we had 56,000, but it then went down. It's gone back up again. 38,000 in December in last year. That's 2,500 more than were in July when Labour came in saying they were going to move people out of those hotels. So we've got a huge number of these people. They're here illegally. We're paying for them. We're not getting rid of them. We're barely deporting. There were 8,200 enforced returns the whole of last year, an increase of 28% in the year before, but just 8,200, largely Albanians. I mean, 25,000 voluntary returns. We're still, by the way, giving those people $3,000 for the privilege of putting them on a plane and a free passage home. Your reaction to the state of those statistics?
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the way they publish the statistics, other than regarding them as irregular rather than illegal, is that they don't actually publish the number of asylum applications that have been granted. And I've been trying to look at these numbers and figure that out. And I think I come to an estimate, but it's not entirely clear. Around 65 to 70,000 people were granted asylum last year. And it seems to me that even though there's the reason there's a reduction in those waiting for an initial response to their asylum applications is even though there haven't been many deportations, is because the Labour government is effectively speeding people through the asylum process.
And often they're not actually granted asylum, but they're granted indefinite leave to stay.
To remain.
Which is so strange. So they haven't been given asylum, they're just here. And they're just basically here in the country forever. We can't get rid of them. Even as we've discovered in recent weeks, they commit a horrific crime, go to prison, and then apparently they've got a right to a family life because they got an Aunt Elsa somewhere in Cleethorpes.
Absolutely. And so what's very difficult to glean from the way the government is handling this is, first of all, the economic damage that's being done, because they try and get them out of hotels. Even, the hotel damage is massive. That's about $8 billion a year by my estimates it costs. But the minute you grant them asylum, of course, these are they're not even low skilled. I'd say most people coming across are unskilled. The vast majority of people coming across are single men from Afghanistan. Goodness knows what they have to offer to the cultural or economic fabric of the United Kingdom.
I think you'll find they're all engineers and brain surgeons if you check more closely, Ben.
And so my view is, without evidence to prove it, is they're moving from hotels to our benefit system and they're being hidden. And last time I looked at the figures, we've got about 1.5 million people of foreign nationality on benefits in the UK, costing us around 10 billion a year. You add that to the 8 billion that we're spending on people in hotels, you're up to 20, probably north of that, Julia, because, these are government figures that we're working on. And as you said, we don't really know, do we? And everything's going to be a lot worse than what they tell us. You're talking about tens of billions of pounds being spent on people who are here illegally, criminals. And we've got to change the way we deal with this. We've got to. You and I had a famous discussion, I think, on the 23rd of April in 2024, and we can have that discussion again. But, we've got to enforce our borders. And then when people do break through whatever enforcement procedures we've got to protect the United Kingdom, we've got to have a robust mechanism by which they are detained. not put in hotels, detained, imprisoned, in other words, and then deported wherever possible. And if they're not capable of being deported, then they must remain in prison. They are criminals. I thought it was brilliant the other day at a congressional hearing. A senator was asked, how many of the illegal migrants were criminals. He said, well, all of them. Yes. Because they all came here illegally.
Yeah, no, I think that was
that
was a White House press conference, and the press secretary said, they're all illegal.
Right.
They're all illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all criminals. I don't understand. I mean, again, using this term irregular, and again, we know there's lots of evidence that actually an awful lot of the people who are asylum seekers are told how they're coping on this pittance of, whatever it is, a few quid a week on top of their room and board. But actually, a lot of them are working in the black economy, and then they get leave to remain. They carry on working the black economy whilst also claiming benefits. Again, they're undercutting.
Absolutely.
They're undercutting, other low-skilled workers who born and bred here who are trying to make ends meet because they were, why would you hire the legal worker when you can hire the illegal worker for half the cost? This is the thing. There still doesn't seem to be any will to deal with this. I mean, I know, the Tories talk a good game. Labour even talking a good game, probably against the wishes of a lot of their MPs and their supporters who apparently think we should have no borders whatsoever and everyone should come on in the waters lovely. But no one seems to ever get a grip on this.
No, so we have at least two bits of legislation that I think make life very, very difficult for the United Kingdom. The first is the Equalities Act, and the other is the Human Rights Act, which takes into our body of law the European Convention of Human Rights and makes the European Court the superior body for human rights adjudications in the United Kingdom. And putting these two bits of legislation together, we are unable effectively to enforce our borders, to detain and then deport because of the Human Rights Act. And because of the Equalities Act, we actually wrap these people in a protected blanket. We give them protected status and we promote them through our society.
But I disagree with you because neither of those laws in any way, they're resting on Article 8, the right to a family life and to privacy, in no way, and I've read it out on air earlier this week, the first thing, right to family life, it will not be infringed by the state unless, and it gives a whole litany of reasons why why it could be, we send people to prison. That deprives them of their family life, for goodness sake. But basically, it's activist judges. I mean, we've got the same thing going on in America with a democratically elected president using executive orders, the powers that he has got within the US Constitution to enact certain things, and he's being stopped at all counts. People, whether staff work from home, whether he's trying to cut budgets and things, by activist judges. Now, America does have, almost by the Constitution, activist political judges. But if you're in this country, if you as a government cannot make a policy, you cannot enforce a policy because of an activist judge completely, I would say, not interpreting but misinterpreting the laws as they stand and not applying them accurately, then I'm afraid we need to get rid of those judges and people sitting on those tribunals. We need a massive clean out of those people.
Yeah, though I think we have to revoke. We've got to set aside the Equalities Act and the Human Rights Act. They've got to go. The Human Rights Act, this is developing the conversation on a bit, but the Human Rights Act has now substituted British culture. When people say, well, what are your values? They quote the Human Rights Act back at me. That's not our culture.
No.
That's a slight digression. But you see, it's hijacked the entire debate. And, we had that example the other day of a Zimbabwean man who couldn't be sent, a paedophile, I think, who couldn't be sent back to Zimbabwe because it would prohibit him from having a family life in the United Kingdom because he had children here. I mean, it's an absolute absurdity. Or the Albanian whose child couldn't eat Albanian chicken nuggets.
Yeah, apparently. Well, we don't know for sure. They just suspected. Well, again, we've also got another story. We've barely got any time here, but dozens of mostly African men, homeless migrants, were basically got to set up a tent camp for a year in Manchester city centre. They were finally evicted by the authorities from their tent village, and they basically just moved 150 yards down the road to create a new sort of shanty village outside the Midland Hotel, a hotel I know well, and basically they literally just picked up their tents and moved along. We cannot, I mean, Paris has got this as well. You simply cannot have a situation where you've got people just setting up camp in the streets, in parks, on the pavements, in our major cities and towns. It's just got to stop. I mean, we just look like third world banana republics.
We are turning into a third world country.
We are.
That is exactly where we're going, economically, culturally, constitutionally, even democratically, constitutionally, as I mentioned. We're having to shut down free speech in order to tolerate or, make sure that society tolerates with the assault that's being perpetrated against it
We ain't
effectively by
tolerating
weak
it.
government.
We ain't tolerating it. I could talk to you for so long, much longer. Come back on again next week. We're going to have a longer chat. Ben Habib, former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. A very quick word from Philip Ingram.
The country's breaking, and the symptoms of the riots that happened when Starmer first came in haven't been dealt with.
No, not well. We're just all far right. Shouting far right at people, it turns out, doesn't resolve the issues, does it? Especially when people have legitimate concerns. And more from Philip Ingram and from me. Lots more top guests coming. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And you can listen, of course, on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watch on YouTube, on your connected device. Lots of ways to watch and to listen. Lots of ways also of getting in touch. I particularly want to hear from you today. What do you want the result of the meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump in the White House later today to be? What do you expect to hear? What do you want to hear? What do you fear you might hear? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV as well. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Obviously, we're going to be talking more about that in this hour, with Keir Starmer warning President Trump that Russia will come again unless the US provides security guarantees to European soldiers, including Brits, who would be stationed in Ukraine after a potential ceasefire. We'll see what comes ahead in that meeting. And also Zelensky visiting Donald Trump tomorrow. Will a deal be done on minerals in return for a security guarantee? Certainly Donald Trump says there's no guarantee to be offered. We're also going to be talking about the latest madness at the BBC, and what a surprise, it involves Gary Lineker. He has joined 650 other usual suspects, the pro-Palestinian virtue-signaling ignoramuses in the media circles, who criticised the BBC over their decision to finally, after a lot of pressure, pull a documentary about Gaza, despite the fact that the documentary was blatant Hamas propaganda and narrated by the son of a Hamas official and minister. So goodness me, I don't know why on earth Gary Lineker's got a problem with that, other than, oh, it's so difficult to work out what it could be, isn't it? Gary, hope you could explain. Do call in at any time. Also going to be talking about the sickness benefits. 550,000 people claiming benefits because of sickness or incapacity have never, ever worked a day in their lives. This comes as Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kendall has vowed to get people off long-term sickness benefits and into jobs. By the way, they're also looking at basically a little bit of a change in that two-child benefit cap to allow parents who've got children under the age of 5 to claim extra benefits for those children, even though, of course, the whole point was to stop them having babies they couldn't afford to look after themselves. What are you doing having children that you need to claim benefits for goodness sake? Anyway, we'll talk about all of that, lots more to come. And joining me for all the chat, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Morning to you once again.
Good morning again.
Lot to cover today, at home and abroad.
Yeah.
Asked you earlier, I'm wondering, we've talked to a former White House official, we've heard calls and things. What do you want the result to be from this meeting today? Anything good? Is anything good going to come of it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is getting that proper understanding, and for the rest of us to get an understanding what the Trump-Starmer relationship is going to be, because Starmer's on the back foot. Trump and his team will see Starmer as a Democrat. He will see him as a little Joe Biden. And
which is fair enough.
It is fair enough, but that puts us on a bit of a
Joe Biden, but compos mentis, so, bonus.
Well, yes. That puts us on a back foot. And that'll dictate then what Trump's policy will be with regard to Ukraine and the UK, with regard to UK and tariffs, with regard to the UK and all the other deals, Chagos and everything else that are going to come out. So it's a really important meeting. And I'm concerned that Starmer hasn't got the personality and the gravitas.
See, Tony Blair, and he's done it. He did it for many years. He can go in, he can charm these people. They've got the gift of the gab. He got the Good Friday Agreement because he can go into one room and say one thing, and he is a deal maker.
A wheeler dealer.
Keir Starmer isn't. Keir Starmer can barely persuade people in his own cabinet of anything. The thing is also, Trump is a very difficult person to deal with because he is irrational.
Yeah.
He is unpredictable. He doesn't know what he thinks himself, and he has basically got the attention span of a gnat. I watched him at a press conference with Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron, who's got very good English, very charming. And Emmanuel Macron, he's hated at home, and quite rightly. He's been terrible to us over Brexit. I'm not a fan of the man, but on international affairs, when it comes to global defence, he's spot on in my view on all those issues. But he gave one answer. I think it was like 2 paragraphs long, and you could literally just watch Donald Trump like, he's lost. You've lost him. Yeah. You've lost Donald. He's gone. Yeah. And let's face it, Keir Starmer is boring by the 3rd word.
Well, yes, exactly.
So he's going to have to really let on. But I hate the fact that what's going to happen to the Ukrainian people, our allies, our European democratic nation state, people have taken women and children into their homes in the last 3 years to save them from Putin's bombs. I hate the fact that is reliant on how well our boring Keir Starmer can work around the unpredictability of the man-child that is Donald Trump. And I said he's still a better option than Joe Biden. But on this, I think that Donald Trump is horrendously, terribly, awfully, morally and national interest-wise absolutely wrong.
Yeah, in everything that is brought up publicly, completely wrong. And Macron and Trump are both egotists. It's their ego that drives everything. Starmer isn't, and Starmer's driven by wokeness and dealing with.
He's arrogant, though. He's an arrogant, tetchy man, but he knows. He is. He knows where the power lies.
But in personality-wise, Trump will run rings around him, and the trouble is, if they get that relationship wrong, that's it for the next 5 years, and potentially longer. And
I'm afraid you have to do a bit of grovelling because But this is the thing: you want America to provide the backstop security guarantee to European troops while they perform a peacekeeping role if there is a ceasefire in Ukraine. Why do you need that American backstop? Because the Labour Party, like the Tory Party, for many years has absolutely abjectly failed, along with all the European nations, to build up our defences so we can defend ourselves. Wake up call. When Donald Trump said this, about NATO, like, well, why should America back people if you're not even paying your own fair share? Even paying 2% requirement at the time. Back in, I think, 2017, he said that in his first term in office. He was laughed at, not just by all the European officials and government ministers, laughed at by the European media. We didn't laugh at him here. I said, I disagree with the man on a million things. On this, he's 100% right. We do need to spend more. And I think it's outrageous that we've relied on an American taxpayer in Arizona to fund our defence and our security.
Exactly. He's 100% right. And Starmer going in there with this, we've gone up to 2.5% of GDP on defence, and we're going up to 3%. But with the headlines now saying, no, you're going up to 2.5%, but you're spending even more on Chagos, which you don't need to give away, and therefore it's actually a defence cut if you look at it in the early years.
Yeah, exactly. If we have a spare 18 billion quid at any point over the next 100 years, it shouldn't be spent on giving it to Mauritius, an ally of China, to give away what we already own. Now, again, this is the stuff I find amazing. Donald Trump, we understand from the Foreign Secretary David Lammy, does have a veto because, of course, the giving away of the Chagos Islands, not legally required, even if it was. Frankly, sod the International Criminal Court of Justice. But it's advisory only. We know that. It doesn't make sense financially, militarily, security. It's just insane. Diplomatic. It opens the floodwaters for many other crazy claims.
Decades ahead.
It's just insane. But of course, the crucial UK-US military base, Diego Garcia. Why on earth would Donald Trump ever agree to this happening once this goes onto his radar, other than he says he's got a good working relationship with his friend Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, who of course will be sniffing around this, as he has around Mauritius and all these other countries in Africa to gain his mineral resources. He wouldn't even stand up for Taiwan in that bizarre press conference at the cabinet meeting. He refused to basically commit that he would never allow China to take Taiwan by force. We are in quite literally dangerous territory here.
The danger that we're in and the playing with fire that Trump's doing is unmeasurable. It's unprecedented. We've never seen this before. Every statement that comes out of him takes us not just one small step, but a giant leap closer and closer to global conflict.
But exactly. But what I don't understand is that he says he's got the art of the deal. He says he's the big negotiator. He says he brings peace. But you get peace again by speaking softly, carrying a big stick. And yeah, America's got the big stick, but the only person who could wage war would be the president with his executive powers, not Congress. They provide the money, but he can go to war. But if you're basically saying to every dictator around the world, off you go, fill your boots. I'm not. And he says it's about American national interest and America first. Protecting Taiwan and stymieing the power of China and Russia is in American interest.
Well, what underpins all of this is economics, economic underpinning of different countries.
Economics does underpin military power.
Well, exactly.
Military power underpins economic power.
The safety provided military power underpins that. And therefore, if we see a shift to Southeast Asia, if we see China take Taiwan back by force, that will make the economic shock that we suffered across the world. So America suffered it as much as we did whenever Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago with a full-scale invasion. It'll seem like small change because there's so much trade comes out of that Southeast Asia area. Taiwan, with all its computer chips, impact the global economy.
But again, why has the West allowed that to happen in the first place? We'll just offshore all of our most vital components for all the things that make 21st century living normal.
The world order is changing dramatically.
I don't think our politicians are up to the job, right? I don't think
they don't see it. They don't get it.
They really don't. Well, they're just hoping it doesn't happen on their watch. That's what it seems like Donald Trump saying, well, Putin didn't invade while I was president. He wasn't ready to invade then. But he would have. He would have.
He would have if he had the opportunity.
He didn't stop when you got elected, did he?
The one thing that Trump brings that stops people invading and attacking all the rest of it is the level of unpredictability, because they don't know how he's going to react, and therefore that'll make a cautious dictator just wait a little bit, because they know that Trump's going to be out in a couple of years.
Very, very crucial. Can we also talk about the Metropolitan Police today? They've been told that they must be less aggressive in a relaunch of Stop and Search. Police in London have been told when they're carrying out Stop and Search, the policy for seizing weapons and drugs, that too many young people have been stabbed in the capital, and they need to carry on with Stop and Search. Stop and Search is quite clearly proven to prevent deaths. It is that simple. If you think you're going to be caught carrying a knife, you're less likely to carry a knife, etc., and you get those off the streets. But basically they're saying officers need to be less aggressive in their approach, make sure they're not, quote, bringing bad energy, is what the public apparently feedback was, a more targeted and tailored use of stop and search to prevent embarrassment and trauma. Now, the reality is, in large parts of inner London, a lot of the population is ethnic minority. A lot of it is Afro-Caribbean. And in large parts of the Afro-Caribbean communities, there is a lot of knife carrying and crime. And most of the people carrying knives and most of the people who are the victims of knife crime are young black men. Yes. So it seems to me to be very obvious that it is young black men who will be mostly targeted by the police. Then we're told this is ethnic profiling. Well, yes.
Well, it's not as criminal profiling. It's not based on anything else. But those are the indicators.
But it does matter how it's done. I think it's very crucial, isn't it, that, I like that people, I want someone filming it on mobile phone, body cam images, but what we understand is not only does that make police officers behave better, and there are police officers who behave very badly and very disrespectfully, but it also means that you can't have accusations being made, false accusations made by those being stopped. But again, I'm a white middle-class woman. Funnily enough, I've never been stopped and searched. I'm low risk for carrying a knife and carrying drugs, and obviously. However, I think, for a lot of young men, and even middle-aged black men who I've spoken to on phone-ins over the years, you know what, it's all very well to say, well, I don't know what your problem is, Yeah, but if it happens to you every week and you're on your way to work, you know what, and you're not treated respectfully, that is going to be an issue. But so it's how it's done, isn't it?
It's a balance, and this is where there needs to be getting back to community policing so that you get that understanding. And it's the same. And it's the same police officers, and they know, and problems can be brought up if that's happening to different things. But I think this is where the local communities, the parents of the kids that are carrying the knives need to take some responsibility. The community leaders need to stop people from carrying knives. And I'm afraid if I was a police officer being put into somewhere where I didn't know what was going on, I was given intelligence to suggest that group of people were carrying knives, I am outnumbered 2 or 3 to 1. I'm going to go in aggressively to try and protect myself and my colleagues that are there, because
we shouldn't put the police in that position.
We shouldn't put the police in that position.
Yeah, very, very, very good. There are said that we know there are a lot of bad apples. There's more than just a few.
Yeah, and if you think someone's got a knife and could stab you, you're a police officer. Where if you're not taser trained, you're not carrying a taser. You've got your stick, and that's it.
Yeah,
well, I'm sorry.
It's not always going to go well for either side.
Let's arm our police routinely, and then and then they can go in even more gently and talk to people, because
the police don't want to be armed, and I don't want our police armed. I'd like the other people not to have arms, but there we are. Just one other topic I want to get to in this section. There's basically a review commissioned by the previous government and led by the Tory peer Baroness Gabby Burton. She used to work for David Cameron. They're basically, it's a review of the online sort of pornography industry, and they basically say they want to make it illegal to possess or publish pornography that shows degrading, violent or misogynistic pornography, including things like women being choked during sex. Basically, there's going to be 32 recommendations what should be done about the high harm sector of legal online pornography. Now, we all know there's some horrible stuff. There's snuff videos and God knows what online on the dark web. Then we're talking about, if you put in, Google porn, those sites that come up that everyone's heard of, don't pretend you haven't looked at them. And the stuff that's on those sites. Now, I've said this to a lot of parents. I've got a teenage daughter, and I think that most parents are completely and utterly unaware, particularly the mums, of what is available. And they think, oh, there's some nasty stuff online. No, it's 2 clicks away. It's literally the first page of these. It's incest. It's always stepmothers, stepdaughters, isn't it? It's barely legal. Women filmed who look like they're underage. It involves an awful lot of very violent, very degrading sex. Nearly always involves different orifices from what most women would prefer most of the time. Let's put it like that. Strangulation, routinely women being grabbed by the throat, routine hair pulling, slapping, women being spat on. Now, I talk very openly with my girlfriends about sex. We're just very, very open, liberal people. I haven't got a single girlfriend who, no matter how much drink is taken and everyone talking freely and openly, who has ever said, yeah, what I really like when I'm having sex is having my windpipe choked, or being spat on, or having my hair pulled, or being slapped. This is not something that women like. Young girls, though, are having their first sexual experiences with teenage boys who think this is what girls like, who think that this is the norm. And the girls think, well, the boys expect it, so this is what I have to do. This is terrifying to me. And no one wants to talk about it because it's all a bit embarrassing and a bit like, oh, we don't want to be judgy. I went to my daughter's school about this. Like, you know what? We don't want to be judgy about what is right, what is wrong. No. You can definitely tell girls what is normal, what is normally expected and acceptable and liked. There have been numerous polls, anonymous polls of women, what they want. That stuff isn't on the list. I mean, people talk about 50 Shades of Grey. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the routine degradation and violence against women, which sometimes can end in their death. How much control can there be, though?
I think there needs to be enormous amounts of control, and I'm going to talk about things that you don't like. I think there needs to be some form of formal identity when people are going into these adult sites, because too many children are getting their first view of sexual what they call sexual experience. It is a sexual experience.
No, but what if that
violence.
stuff was banned? Look, people are going to find the nasty stuff. They've always been able to find the nasty stuff somewhere. But if your average teenage boy, your teenage girl, when they're looking for this stuff, they don't see that stuff, would that not at least be a start?
Well,
if you want to be in the search engine and not on the dark web, you can't show that stuff.
But that would be virtually impossible to do, because by the time we get the legislation in to do that, and the government brings it in, the technology is there, the kids will know how to get it from other countries and go around it. We can't ban it on servers in other countries. So
how come China manages to ban things in their country?
They'll get access to it because they control everything that people see. There is no freedom of speech or expression in China. Now,
There's a balance.
We could do that. There's a balance. And this goes far too far the wrong way in the balance. And there needs to be something done, and there needs to be pressure put in the big tech companies to put these filters in. It'll never be 100%, but there also then needs to be combined education into schools.
But hold on a minute, like there's stuff online, I get that, but there's stuff, what we can broadcast at different times, what TV stations can broadcast, what cinemas can broadcast. There are strict rules about that. Why should that be different?
Well, it shouldn't be different, but I think there's other things when you come into broadcast, and you get all of these different reality TV programs, the Love Island, the Naked Dating programs, the rest of it. What it's doing is
a lot about them.
It's objectifying people the whole way through, and people will
that's
talk
different.
about that.
No, I think that's a completely different thing from a woman being strangled.
It is completely different from a woman being strangled, but in the same way that you go from soft Class B drugs up to hard Class A drugs, they're all in the same spectrum. And I'm sorry, once we've got society pushing us onto that spectrum, people will go to the more extremes, and that's what.
But it's how easily people can access it, I think, is my issue. But I don't want people to have to log in and identify themselves before they watch their, weird foot fetish porn or whatever it is people are into.
But don't go into it.
You're a strange breed, you men, is all I can say. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It's very difficult because I'm freedom of speech and everything, but I really don't think I want people routinely seeing this stuff and thinking this is normal. It's not normal. We're allowed to say it's not normal. Anyway, more from Philip, more from me, more from you coming up. Want to hear your thoughts on anything we're talking about, in particular there. What do you expect or hope or fear to hear from Keir Starmer and Donald Trump's meeting at the White House later today? 344 499 1000 is the number to call. Get your calls and more of your messages up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Coming up very soon, we're going to be talking to a commentator who defends Gary Lineker, criticising the BBC for pulling that Gaza propaganda documentary in inverted commas. Also going to be talking about the benefits claimants, more than 550,000 of whom claiming they're on sickness or incapacitated, who have never worked a day in their lives. We're a very sickly bunch here in the UK at times, aren't we, Philip? So much more sickly than any other Western country. I wonder what could possibly be going wrong. Must be something in the water, eh? Anyway, I've been asking you to get in touch about what you want the result to be from this meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump at the White House today. What do you expect? What do you want? What do you fear is going to happen? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. But messages coming in as well on text and on X. John says, Starmer resigning as PM. That would be a good story, wouldn't it? I'd be gutted not to be on air tomorrow. Jane says, freedom of speech returned, the Chagos deal scrap, more money for defence and for the boats to be stopped once and for all. I think, Jane, you're a little bit optimistic today. Mikey says, a free trade deal on the condition that the UK retains Chagos and for DEI to be scrapped. Yeah, we'd like that. Dan says, for the Chagos deal to be thrown in the bin and for two-tier Keir to be given a good slap. Got to remember, he is representing us at that point. Any mistreatment or rudeness towards Keir Starmer is basically dissing us as a country. So I'm afraid.
So we'll not call him Keith then?
No, we're not. Do call him Keith. Come on, please, Donald, call him Keith. I'd kill myself laughing. Sammy says Starmer's resignation and for the Chagos deal to be scrapped. Samuel says net zero dumped and an end to calling working class white people far right. Daniel says for Starmer to not completely embarrass himself. Pat says to see the end of the disastrous Chagos deal. It's amazing how many people feel strongly about this deal. I think they thought there was something they could just do and no one would really notice. But again, this is my thing about the Chagos deal, other than how awful it is. It's the idea that you'd come into government and that with all the problems this country is facing, all the things we're dealing with domestically and internationally, the idea that the Chagos Islands would be in your top 4 billion things on your to-do list is so insane. There's something else going on.
And every excuse they put out is just factually wrong.
Yeah.
So it's not just something else going on. People will automatically think that there's something dodgy going on.
I think there is something going on. I think there is something dodgy going on. It's
like
the Chinese embassy. I can look across the river where we are outside our studio, and they're going to build this. They basically looks like the government is going to probably allow this massive, huge Chinese embassy complex, which is going to be built over key cables that go into the city of London. All the security services, city, everyone has said this is too dangerous, don't do it. They haven't done it yet. Looks like they're going to do it. Why? Why would you even consider it? Why did the last government want to allow the Chinese to, a Huawei, the Chinese basically controlled company, to build our 5G network? Why is Peter Mandelson our man in Washington when he has very close links with the Chinese government? I'm sorry, there's something. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, never have been. I always cock up. It's always incompetence. But I'm sorry, something's going on.
There's a fantastic model in the Museum of Military Intelligence up at Chicksands in Bedfordshire, where in Berlin the communication cable from the Russian embassy in West Berlin into the east, there was a house above it. The British bought the house, dug into the cellars, had tapped into the cables that were in there, and the model shows you the little RMP standing outside with his machine gun if anyone came in and didn't do the 3 knocks on the door and get in, and the operators inside listening in continuously.
So we know how to do it. Do you think the Chinese don't? There we are. Right then, well, look, let's go to the call. Sorry to keep you waiting. John is in Bradford. Apologies, we're yapping away at each other. What do you want to say, John?
Yeah, good morning. Right, it's about the Chagos Islands. Yep. I think that the government knows it's a bad deal. I think Lammy knows it's a bad deal. They were going to find this before Trump got in, and then all of a sudden they're deciding, let's see if he gets elected and let him sit round the table. I think they know it's a bad deal, but they don't want to give in, so they're hoping that Trump will veto it. And then if he vetoes it, they'll be able to come back with clean hands and say, well, look, it wasn't us.
That would be a national humiliation. But hold on, these negotiations have been ongoing for a long time in a sort of haphazard, half-hearted way under Boris Johnson and others since that ruling. I mean, it's all just been kicked into the long grass. I mean, everyone should have said immediately, no, not playing, move along, don't be stupid, not happening, which is if they had any balls about them. But what, I think they genuinely want the deal. I don't agree with you. I think they really want the deal. I don't know why.
Well, I think that they are having second thoughts, but they don't want to be seen to give in. So they're hoping that Donald Trump will do it for them and saying, right, we're going to veto this.
But won't that be a national humiliation for us?
Well, of course it. Well, no, because I suppose it would be, yes, but I mean, it's better than them coming to Parliament and say, "Oh, we've had second thoughts, so I don't think we'll support it anymore." If Trump comes down and say, "I'm vetoing it," then you know.
I support any sinner who repenteth. And what do you make on Ukraine? Do you think we're going to get some sort of move forward on Ukraine issue?
Well, I've got a diverse opinion on Ukraine. What we've got to understand is that these two areas which are being fought over, the Russian speakers there were treated very badly, right?
Not as badly as Ukrainian speakers are treated under the Russians.
No, but I'm just saying that they were treated like second-class citizens, and this gave Russia the excuse to come in and basically take over the area. So, you know, I'm a bit. I can see what you're saying, and I believe that there should be a peace deal, but not at any cost.
No, I certainly think not at any cost. John, appreciate your call. Thank you so much. On a completely different topic, Stuart is on the line in Wigan. Stuart, you want to talk about Gary Lineker? He's criticised the BBC along with hundreds of others of the usual suspects in the pro-Palestinian woke virtue signalling world, saying they shouldn't have pulled that Gaza documentary, which was exposed as nothing but Hamas propaganda.
Well, yeah, okay. I just think, well, I mean, I think he is detestable anyway, to be honest. I mean, since he stopped being a football player, you need to get back in your lane, shut your mouth, keep your opinions to yourself, because they're not wanted by 99.9% of people in this country. If you're that bothered about the illegal immigrants, get them in your garden.
Yeah, well, there is that.
Your kids and your wife.
I don't think he's detestable. I think he's laughable. I think he's incredibly badly informed, and he's just sort of classic sort of like, oh, like me. What's the latest woke opinion? And he spouts that opinion. He knows nothing. He's perfectly entitled to give an opinion, but just not while he works at the BBC.
Yeah, but I think that's detestable. That's just me. But can I also say that I disagree with you as well in the fact that Keir Starmer, the rat, has ever...
No, I'm going to stop you. No, I don't think... I think we can mock people. I don't like that language being talked about. I don't think we need to call him a rat.
Well, I don't think he's ever represented this country.
I'll agree with you on that.
So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if Trump wants to get him in that Oval Office and kick him all around every wall in there, I'm quite happy with that. That's no disrespect to me.
Very good point. Very interesting, Stuart. Thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Very clear speaking there from Stuart. Philip, the thing is, how our Prime Minister, whether you like our Prime Minister or not, is treated is representative of of the status of our country and how I'm not having anyone dissing our country.
Well, exactly. But isn't it interesting that so many people are hoping that he's going to effectively go in and see the headmaster with telephone directories on the back of his trousers and be humiliated? What does that say about the country's view on Keir Starmer?
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen from a country perspective. And actually, I do think Donald Trump, you putting the politics to one side, actually has got a respect for the UK, and he's got close links into it.
Mother's British, or grandmother,
and you know, he owns golf courses in Scotland, and he loves the royal family, and you know,
I mean, seriously, roll out
the
red carpet, sleep in the king's bed with him. I don't care. That's what the royal family is supposed to be for that sort of soft power. That's something we've got which other countries don't have.
Well,
if we're going to have it, let's use it.
And we should have sent Prince William across with Keir Starmer, and then that would have just mellowed everything. But yes, we've got Peter Mandelson instead.
We could agree to take Meghan and Harry back.
Well,
I mean, I don't know. It's not a good deal for us.
Well, no, but Donald has said he doesn't want to upset Harry anymore because that was absolutely fantastic because he has to put up with her.
He says he's got it bad enough already with his wife. Absolute genius. That's what people say about my husband. 11:33 is the time. Up next, going to talk more about Gary Lineker and the BBC and also talk about those 550,000 people claiming benefits on sickness and incapacity who have never worked a day in their lives. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. 11:35 is the time. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Philip Ingram's still with me. Can't wait to hear your thoughts on our next conversation. We've been talking just a bit about it, and it just came up the last few moments in a call with Stuart about this BBC documentary, supposedly about Gaza, effectively narrated by a young child who turns out to be the son of a Hamas official, a Hamas government minister. There's no way in the world that the people doing the filming of that wouldn't have known this about the child. Huge issues with the video in terms of the propaganda position it takes, but also, I mean, frankly, just things like the child apparently wearing 3 different pairs of shoes and having different haircuts and apparently the same day would suggest that something was a bit wrong with this video. You think some BBC editor might have noticed. Well, other people did notice. They called them up on it. Brilliant work from a journalist David Collier. But it took quite a while to persuade the BBC to take the video down. Now, though, Gary Lineker, Anita Rani, Miriam Margolis, the likes of director Ken Loach and Mike Lee, and all the other usual suspects of the basically, you know, virtue signalling woke lovies. They're among 650 media figures who've criticised the BBC and called this censorship. Well, let's talk about this with Donica McCarthy, who's a political commentator. Good morning, Donica.
Good morning, Julia. How are you?
Hi. Well, I'm very well. I'm very pleased that something that claimed to be reporting has been taken down because it's actually propaganda from Hamas. Why do you think that Gary Lineker and these lovies are all right?
Well, I think hopefully the BBC is just checking the veracity of what the programme's about, and it will be.
Shouldn't they do that before they put it out?
Well, when you ever do a 9-month documentary in a war zone, it is not surprising that some issues may arise. I actually think the major issue here, of course, is censorship. I don't understand why British media and British government allows the one side of a conflict to have access to our media and the other side not. As an Irish person, we have great empathy when we see places like the Warsaw Ghetto being devastated, the Ukraine being devastated, and when we see the scenes in Gaza, it breaks our heart because it reminds us of what we went through. My father was 16 years old, Julia, when the British gunboats arrived up the rivers in Cork and Dublin, flattened our cities. And so we have huge compassion when we see such devastation. We think both sides of the conflict should have access to our media. Otherwise, it's censorship and it's free speech.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you say both sides, I've seen numerous interviews with people representing the Palestinian civilians over the last year and a half plus since we've had the October 7th massacre. We hear from the Israelis, obviously, because we've got an Israeli government. We've got spokespeople, we've got IDF and others and government ministers. But very difficult to... Donica, wait. Very difficult for people to hear from what Hamas have to say, other than when they, of course, stage a hostage return and put their banners up and make their statements, because they are, of course, a prescribed terrorist organisation.
And then that's the point I'm trying to make. I actually think Hamas is the government of Gaza. They were originally elected by the people. Gaza.
2005.
Whatever your views on the government of Gaza, and I don't approve of any religious-dominated government, whether it's a Zionist regime in Tel Aviv or the Hamas.
So what do you mean a Zionist regime in Tel Aviv?
Well, I mean the terrorist organisation that has actually killed thousands of people over the last year, innocent children, thousands of kids.
So you're calling the democratically elected Israeli government a Zionist machine and terrorist organisation?
Just as I would call the Hamas regime in
You think there's no moral difference between Hamas and what they do and the Israeli government?
They are both. There is a moral difference between the two. One is an occupied people.
So the Israeli government's worse than Hamas.
The other is a colonial regime.
Colonial regime.
Before Britain's empire, it was the Balfour Declaration, Julia, the population of Palestine was 8% Jewish. After the imperial government gave the go-ahead, the population started having a huge influx from Europe. And what we need to do is to find a way to peacefully manage that legacy.
If only you could think of a reason why a lot of Jewish people from Europe went to Israel. It's so difficult. I haven't read any history books, Donna. I just simply can't think what the reason was. You are aware also that Jews were expelled from every Arab state as well.
I'm not denying that there was problems in Europe, but what I am asking you, Julia, is for compassion for the people who are paying the price. There was
Well, I've got lots of compassion for the people who are paying the price. It's the Israeli innocent civilians and the Palestinian innocent civilians. Here's the trouble. Here's the trouble, Donica. Here's the trouble. The Israeli government, for all its faults, and it has many faults I don't like, certainly the right-wingers in that government I've got no time for whatsoever. However, it's a democratically elected coalition government, okay?
Democratically elected government of a part of the population of Palestine, just like we had in
Hamas is not a democratically elected government. It is a Well, I don't know. How long does the democratic mandate last for?
How do you
have
elections when there's constant
war? I'm sorry. Israel hasn't been in the Gaza since 2005 until after October the 7th. They had plenty of time for elections, my love. They didn't have any.
What is Gaza? What is Gaza?
Okay.
Gaza is 2 million people evicted from their homes by the Nakba, by the Zionist regime, and curled into a tiny sliver of land, and it's no wonder there's violence coming out. We've got to sort out the political.
Okay, that's rather okay. Is that not completely irrelevant to the question I asked you about the BBC and Gary Lineker and those?
The debate we're having, Julia, is I believe both sides of the conflict should have access to British media. You seem to think only one side should have it.
I mean, it's every single bit of footage that we've had out of Gaza since October the 7th has been provided and censored and agreed to by Hamas, because no other footage comes out. The Israelis didn't allow any international media in. And you know why they didn't do that? Because they know how much control Hamas has over everything that happens there. They also know they would have been likely taken hostage. You just create more hostages and more problems. Now, there's very simple reason for that.
There is propaganda from both sides. There is Hamas propaganda.
There's a war on. There's always propaganda. Hamas has won the propaganda war with useful idiots like yourself. And I use the term useful idiot advisedly, not as an insult to you, but people who just take what they say. Here's the thing. Should the BBC...
Julia, come on, I thought we were better than that. We've got a good relationship.
No, I'm not. I'm saying, I'm using... You know the term useful idiot. Useful idiot to the Soviet Union of China.
Have a respectful conversation.
No, I'm not saying... No, I'm not saying... I'm not using the term... You know exactly what that term means, and it has specific meaning. People who just suck out the teat of the mad propaganda from our enemies, which is what you and Gary Lineker and others have done.
No, not our enemy. I don't see Hamas as our enemies. I don't see the government as our enemies. I see them as involved in a conflict in a country that is far away from Britain, and we should allow both sides to be heard.
Donica, the point is, this wasn't billed as if you don't think Hamas... I hate to tell you, Hamas would kill you as soon as look at you.
Of course, I don't approve of them.
But they're not our enemy.
The Zionist government either.
Yeah, I hate to tell you, you'd count as the infidel, my lovely. You wouldn't be. You'd be on the death list, right? Okay. So, are you going to convert? Are you going to convert to Islamofascism under the Hamas regime, or are you taking death? Which is it?
Because I want freedom of speech doesn't mean I agree with either side of the expression.
Donica, you know I defend freedom of speech. The point is, this documentary.
You're opposing it.
This documentary was not purporting to be here's Hamas's view, here's a Hamas official's son, here's a propaganda video, this is what they want to put out, and it was purporting to be a BBC documentary about the reality of life for innocent Palestinian children. And when the key child involved in hosting this propaganda video is the child of a Hamas government minister.
Of an agricultural minister. The child of an agricultural minister who is a civil servant, and the Zionist body said that child should not have a voice. Why should not a 14-year-old son of a civil servant, agricultural minister, not have a voice in British...
Okay, question to you, Donica. Donica, question. A question. Donica, you said that point. You don't need to keep saying it. If it was the voice of this son of a Hamas minister, okay, why didn't the BBC flag that up?
Well, actually, they are actually. I agree, it should have been done. And what
but why didn't they?
The reviewing.
Why didn't they?
What they will do.
No, Donica, answer one of the questions I've asked you. Why didn't they?
The spokesperson today said that they are reviewing the programme, and hopefully they will put up the programme with the information that you rightly say should be.
Why didn't they put it in the first place? Either they didn't know, which was a breach of basic editorial control, or they knew and they didn't mention it?
A breach of editorial knowledge. You know, I've written, as a journalist for The Independent, I wrote columns, I wrote articles. It may have happened that when I was writing a column, I did not know a piece of information. Thankfully, during my years of writing, I had never had to be corrected, but I am human. Journalists are human, and that's what happened in this case. On the BBC should put it right. I think both of us agree. It should be the information should be included, but the programme should be broadcast.
But only as here's some Hamas propaganda for you. The continuity issues are known. Any editor worth their salt with more than 10 minutes experience would have looked at the continuity problems. A child who apparently on the same day had hair that was long and then short, wore 3 different pairs of shoes, trainers, Crocs and flip-flops in apparently the same day, changed outfits.
And you're talking about shoes, Julia. Come on.
Donica,
you're better than this.
Donica, you're not listening to my point. When the document...
You're talking about shoes.
Yes.
You're talking about haircuts.
Yes, because there were flags, there were blatant red flags that showed that this documentary was not what it purported to be.
Slaughtered.
Oh, yes, of course you are. Slaughtered how?
By bombs, by 2,000-pound bombs, this indiscriminately dropped on civilians.
Indiscriminately dropped?
All human international rights.
Even based on Hamas's own figures on the number of deaths there have been, it is quite clear that the number of civilian deaths per fighters' deaths is about 1 to 1. Do you know of any other country in any war that has ever achieved such a low civilian death count per soldier?
Thankfully, the International Court of Justice, thankfully Amnesty International, thankfully the international community agrees that there was a horrific human rights crimes carried out in Gaza.
That's not what they said. That is not what... that's not what they said. Donica, you know, if you were writing an article about this, there'd be a correction, because that's not what they said.
Well, if you actually look at the film footage that your studio is quite rightly showing, the background of that child, we constantly see the flattened buildings. Almost every building...
Why on earth would those buildings be flattened?
Because they actually indiscriminately dropped...
No, that's not indiscriminate. No, they bombed buildings where Hamas fighters were hiding.
Every single thing in Gaza, Julia. Please, look at it.
Donica, the only person, the only people responsible for what's happened to Gaza and what's happened to that child is Hamas, the prescribed terrorist organisation that you think is...
The apartheid regime in Israel needs
It's not an apartheid regime. Arabs vote in elections in Israel just as much.
It is an apartheid regime. And what are we going to do?
Donica, my love, I'm going to end this now, partly because of time and partly because, all due respect, you're talking such abject, ignorant, uninformed, factually incorrect nonsense. You may as well work at the BBC doing news reporting on Gaza. 11:47 is the time. I'm going to get the reaction of Philip Ingram in a few moments. This is Talk. We are mostly the home of common sense.
He will back reform this local elections, but reform shouldn't count on his support beyond that.
It'll be interesting if Dominic Cummings starts to sidle up, because he's a very divisive figure, and it'll be interesting to see how Nigel responds to that. When people were criticising Labour Tommy Robinson, I actually thought to myself, well, that actually shows leadership, because I crave in this country leaders who actually do not get deflected simply because somebody criticises them or accuses them of something, or says, oh, you've upset this group of wannabe whatevers, activists.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh, has everyone had a cup of tea and a lie down in that break? 11:49 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Got to get to another guest in a couple of moments, but Philip Ingram, you were listening. Loved your face throughout that interview with Donna McCarthy.
I had my head in my hands.
Come on.
Looking forward.
What's your reaction?
He's got his Irish history wrong.
Shocker.
But we're not here to talk about that at the minute. He got his understanding of Hamas wrong. He tried to link them to representing the Palestinian people and Muslims.
They were elected.
The first thing that happened after the election was they had a civil war with Fatah, who are provide the Palestinian president, the Palestinian prime minister, the representative in the United Nations, in all of the Palestinian embassies around. They don't agree with each other. Fatah did not recognise them as a legitimate government within Gaza. But that's what happened. They are not a religious organisation. They're a fundamentalist organisation who want to change things and interpret elements of the Muslim faith to their end. So he was getting so much wrong.
It's amazing
with all
how
of it.
often people who don't also, I just do find anybody, I mean, you can criticise the Israeli government, I often do, but if you are basically making moral equivalence between the Israeli democratically elected government and Hamas, a proscribed terrorist organisation, then I mean, as I say, I use the phrase useful idiots. I'm not calling him, I'm saying useful idiots, people who just take
He's lost the moral high ground, and therefore, if you're not on the moral high ground, you've lost the underpinning of any discussion, any argument that you put across.
Yeah, exactly, and a complete lack of understanding how wars are fought. Yeah, I mean, you can show people show footage on what's happened in Ukraine, and the same people who will be absolutely horrified by Ukraine and say it's so terrible, and then we'll just say like, oh, but it's so much worse in Gaza. Is it?
No,
Is it? I mean,
again, he doesn't understand the targeting process.
No,
and a lot of the analogies he's used were just wrong.
Yeah,
they're spin.
Facts. Well, again, it's propaganda. It's propaganda. Gary Lineker, do call in anytime. Love to hear your thoughts. I bet you know even less than Donica on this subject. Right now, let's talk about something we should all know a bit more about, and that is what we are spending on benefits. Matthew Lesh joins us now. He's Public Policy Fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the free market think tank. Very good morning to you, Matthew.
Good morning.
Apologies, we went on a bit longer with that conversation about Gaza than we'd planned to, so we've not got much time, so we'll get straight to it. Latest figures show that more than 500,000 people, 550,000 people in this country claiming benefits for health reasons have never worked a day in their lives. Tell us, are these statistics, is that comparable, population-wise with other Western nations, or are we peculiarly unable to work and sick and incapacitated?
Yeah, look, I think this is a tragedy, and in some senses is a peculiarly British tragedy. The UK is the only G7 country where the employment rate hasn't reached what it was pre-pandemic levels. And we've seen this quite substantial increase in those who are out of work, not looking for a job and on sickness benefits. And this is awful for those individuals who themselves are often not left in a great position by the system, but also, of course, it's a tragedy for the taxpayer. And we're currently on track to hit £100 billion on this type of welfare bill by 2030. It's not sustainable at all. The effective underlying problem here, of course, is the fact that if you move from an unemployment benefit to a sickness benefit, you're really in a much better position. You get paid basically twice as much, and you also don't have to look for a job. So as many people as possible are trying to get onto that sickness benefit. There is some concern that doctors who feel like the healthcare system isn't working particularly well are just quick to sign them off and say this person can't work anymore. And I think that just leaves people there languishing. It's not a great income. It's enough to get you by, but it's not a great income, and it's not a great way to live your life, never having worked, never having felt like you're
but for a lot
society.
of these people, the alternative, people often think, we wouldn't want to live like that. No one would choose to. You get the middle classes always say, no one would choose to live like that. Well, actually, if the alternative is actually, a rotten, minimum wage job in unpleasant conditions with a pain in the backside boss and getting up early in the morning, frankly, a lot of people would choose that option. And again, a lot of these people may be able to be doing the old bit of cash in hand work here and there. I mean, again, I don't know anyone who doesn't know someone who has been doing that at some point, and often in their own family, by the way. But this is the thing, it's the sheer numbers. We've got, 650,000 more people are claiming sickness and disability benefits since the pandemic, according to the labour force survey by the ONS. You mentioned that £100 billion figure. We ain't got the money. It's not going to happen. We simply don't have the money by the end of the decade. We will be a bankrupt nation. I mean, they'll basically be, we'll be paying sort of 90% tax to pay for this. But a lot of these people are young people. It's not like, we've got an ageing population, a lot of people in their 60s who are unhealthy, can't work anymore. We're talking about people under the age of 40, and a lot of it isn't a physical, easily determinable issue like someone is disabled or someone, or something awful like, they've got cancer and and they're just simply unable to work. We're talking about people claiming that they have got stress-related problems, anxiety, they've got depression. We have seen an explosion in that. And I'm sorry, I simply don't believe it.
Yeah, part of the issue as well, I think, here is that if you're kind of languishing on an out-of-work benefit due to mental health issues, you're likely to be stuck there.
Yeah.
You're not likely to get into the habit of going to work. And the evidence is quite clear that if people do get stuck on these benefits, particularly at a younger age, as you're saying, they're very unlikely to ever enter the workforce in a meaningful way. And I doubt that's particularly helpful to their mental health issues, to the extent to which they do exist.
Work is good for you. Work is good for your physical health, for your mental health. People who work live longer. I mean, it's really that basic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a loss to them, it's a loss to everyone else. And I think we've got to get back here to what is the incentive structure of the system? Because I think a big problem here is once you are on these kind of benefits, working might not actually be better for you financially, at least in the short run, because if you do start working, you might lose your benefit. And if the loss of the benefit might be more than the income you start receiving as an employee. So the system, in a sense, is broken. It's kind of leaving people trapped. It's the classic story of the safety net that people get, entrapped in the net. They get stuck by the safety of it.
But we know that there are very few sanctions. I mean, there's been barely any sanctions. So, it's been like 6,000 sanctions or something a year of people who basically got offered a job and don't take a job. I know someone who works the benefits system, and she tells me it's very blatant. She has people who say to her, look, I can claim all my benefits, all these other benefits, my housing benefit, and everything. I only work 16 hours a week, i.e. my 2 days a week. It's absurd. Of course, you can't pay your bills on 2 days a week and pay for your family. But my boss wants me to work 5 days. What benefits do I lose if I do that and my income goes up? And basically, it's going to be a tenner better off. You think, oh, well, you're a tenner better off. Tenner better off for working 3 more days a week. Why on earth would anyone do that? So, of course, they don't. Now, but here's the thing. Shouldn't be an option. It shouldn't be an option. There's no reason why anybody needs to be working 2 days a week if there's been an offer. There's plenty of jobs around. Most employers are crying out for people. It's not as good as it was a couple of years ago, but there are jobs if people want to take them. I just think we just need to have a much more ruthless policy. And by the way, the madness we've learned today, the government is looking at the 2-child benefit limit and looking at saying, well, for under 5s, we'll loosen it. And so actually we will pay extra child benefit for those who have children under 5. When the whole point of this benefit, which by the way has massively widespread support, including among Labour voters, particularly among low earners, that actually the whole point is to dissuade people from having the babies that become under 5s.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? There is this big distinction between where the Labour MPs sit and the Parliamentary Party is putting all this pressure onto the government to get rid of this 2-child welfare.
Totemic for a lot of MPs, isn't it?
Indeed. It's almost like why they're in the Labour Party and why they enter politics.
They're desperate for more people who can't support themselves or the children they've already got to have more children. I mean, that's a platform to stand on, isn't it?
I think it's a bit of a sad discussion. I think the discussion should be about ensuring that families have better paying jobs, that they have the skills they need to go out there into the workplace, that they have more opportunities to earn higher incomes, rather than this kind of dependence on the welfare state. So then the government's left in this weird position, stuck between their own MPs and where they know the public is at, which is the public don't want to see the end of this cat whatsoever. And as you've said, the polling is quite consistent that people would like to see the welfare bill cut. They don't think it's a particularly fair society where we have to work hard, pay ever higher taxes, and there's a set of people who don't seem to work and they're not encouraged to work.
But there's no, I don't detect from Liz Kendall any real urgency in dealing with this. We've seen nothing like it, nothing like what we've seen from, say, Doge under Trump in America, and if that's the actual employees. I mean, God, we've got enough employees who are doing very, very little in the public sector as it is. We can see that from the productivity rates we're seeing versus the private sector. But we've simply got to have more people work. We've got an ageing population, which is a good thing. We've got more people living longer. That's a great thing. We need to encourage more people to have kids. Well, they're only going to be able to do that if they're working, if they're not paying silly amounts in tax to fund all the layabouts sitting at home.
And of course, the issue here is that we've put up the taxes to such a high level where for a lot of higher income earners, they're not particularly incentivized to work much harder because they know that the government's just going to come and take 40+%, 45% of their...
Absolutely. Oh, it's a deep sigh all-round kind of topic, isn't it? I know we'll talk to you again about this. Matthew Lesh from the Institute of Economic Affairs, thank you very much. Going to get the thoughts of Philip Ingham on this. I won't let you get them into 10 seconds. I know you've got a lot more to say. We're also going to be talking more about that meeting between Trump and Starmer. What do we expect? What do we fear? What do we hope to hear from it? That's all coming up. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. We very much appreciate your company, whether you are listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. As I say, always great to have you join us. Lots of you getting in touch as well. Lots of phone calls are waiting for us. Try and get some more of those in the next half hour. I want to know, what do you want the result to be from Keir Starmer and Donald Trump's meeting in the White House today? What do you want? What do you hope? What do you expect? What do you fear the outcome will be? Whether it's about Ukraine, Chagos Islands, tariffs, you name it. How embarrassing it could be. I mean, we were saying maybe Donald calls him Keith or something like that. But we don't want him dissing our Prime Minister, whether you like Keir Starmer or not. He's representing us in the White House today. But give us a call. Let us know what you think on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch on X at talkTV. And don't forget, of course, that calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. We're going to be talking more about that. Also going to be talking about this boost to the military budget. The Prime Minister refusing to rule out yesterday repeatedly, and his Defence Secretary this morning, that a significant chunk of that increase, he claims it's 13.5 billion, it's actually 6 billion, would actually be spent on the government's Chagos deal. I mean, mind-blowing stuff. Also, we're going to talk about Scotland's First Minister John Swinney. He's backed the right of trans-identifying men, he uses the term trans women, I don't want to use that term anymore, they're men, to use women's toilets and changing rooms. Deep sighs with the SNP. Also, a space probe called Odin has been launched on Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket to embark on a mission to scout out an asteroid's potential for mining. The asteroid mission is a high risk, but experts hope it will mark a new dawn for mining rich elements and resources in vast, vast quantities, dwarfing what we currently have, which will be good for us all, would it not? We'll talk to our space expert, Andy Lound, about that coming up. Philip Ingham still with me, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. Get your thoughts on all of the big topics. Thanks so much for joining us still.
My pleasure.
We didn't have time at the end of that conversation we just had with the IEA's Matthew Lesh about benefits claims. 550,000 people in this country claiming incapacity or sickness benefits who've never worked. That massive explosion since the pandemic, largely for mental health claimed problems. I'm saying claimed advisedly. No other country, people always do, lockdown did a lot of damage. No other country that had similar lockdowns has had similar numbers. Lots of talk about, from the Work and Pensions Secretary Liz Kent, about getting people back to work who've been on benefits. But if someone's never worked, someone's in their late 20s, they haven't had a job for 10 years, I mean, for a start, who'd want to employ that person? Are we ever going to get those people back to work?
Well, I think people should be made to work for their benefits.
I'm with you. I'm all in favour of welfare.
You've got someone has to live somewhere. Outside where they live, there's going to be graffiti, there's going to be weeds in the street, there's going to be litter. They have to just prove that they are picking up litter, they're weeding and they're cleaning off graffiti.
Go and find yourself a job. You don't want to do that. Go and find yourself a job.
But to continue to get their benefits, they have to prove that they've done some stuff in the community. And you could all do that through an app. You don't need supervision. Some stuff in the community to allow them to then go and improve, and they then continue to get their benefits. That'll give them a work ethic, and they'll suddenly go, hang on, why am I not going out and getting paid?
The proof of you're looking for a job is a joke.
It is
we've had employers who've got in touch, and I've spoken to them in person, who've said, someone applies for a job, they don't turn up to the interview, they give you the wrong mobile number, so they go through the motions. Everyone's time is wasted. But you know what? As I've always said, when they're hungry enough, they'll work. I can't think of anything more tragic for our nation, for people who are working, and indeed for the individual themselves, to have a whole generation of young people in particular who are not working, who are on the scrap heap of life, because their lives are never going to be worthwhile.
And the people who suffer most are those that really need the benefits.
Exactly.
We
want to be able to give those people a better standard of living.
A much better standard of living. And the trouble is, all the people who are playing and gaming the system are taking away from them.
Well, they're stealing from taxpayers and they're stealing from those people. I mean, genuinely, exactly. I mean, the thing is, I think there needs to be more shame.
Oh, very much so.
I think there needs to be. We need to bring back shame on so many different measures. The old-fashioned things did work; they really did. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Right now, let's get back to what we think is going to happen in the White House today with Tobias Ellwood, former Defence and Foreign Minister and a former Conservative MP, of course. Very big welcome back to the show, Tobias. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Tobias? I don't know whether you are on mute. I can't.
Good to see you again.
Oh, I've got you again. Lovely.
I can hear you. Yes, hi.
Great, wonderful. We've got you back. It's been a little while. Very good to hear from you. Just wondering. So, the question we're putting to our audience: what do you want the result of this meeting between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump? It's going to be around 5 o'clock in the Oval Office. It's going to go on. There's going to be a lunch and various, behind the scenes and press conferences and the like. What do you want? What do you want? What do you expect? What do you fear will come out of this meeting?
Yeah, I mean, with everything going on, this is a critical meeting. The first time the two leaders are sitting down to establish the rapport, the relationship that you imply. But obviously, there's serious matters on the table that need to be addressed. And huge mixed messages coming, I'm afraid, from the White House, from President Trump. And part of, I think, the president's visit will be to try and ascertain, to try and understand where America is going, because America has courted Russia, brought in Putin from the cold, instructed his cabinet to say Ukraine started the war. And why did America vote with Russia at the United Nations? Is this all part of a grand strategic plan that secures a viable deal? His whole art of the deal, as we talk about a lot, or is this actually a fundamental and dangerous change, in fact, in the US-European relationship that's now simply more transactional, upending any sense of historic duty to defend the ailing international rules-based order? And that is what we need to assess. Are we now in a more chaotic world where everybody looks after themselves, superpowers look after their own regional influence? If this is the case, then big questions for Ukraine and indeed for Europe, because Putin will not stop there. He still has his eye on Ukraine. That's where he wants to go. And a further conflict, a wider conflict, is down the road, is more likely if America does dial back from its interests in Europe.
And this is the thing where we told Donald Trump it's America first, putting American interests first. That's fine. But one of the reasons why America has been involved so much as the world's policeman, effectively, has been because it has been in America's interest. And it's interesting. So much recent months and years has been about America turning its attention away from the transatlantic alliances, looking at Asia, looking across the Pacific. And then yesterday, extraordinarily, in a response to a reporter at the White House cabinet meeting yesterday, Donald Trump was asked, whether he would, basically confirm that he would come to the aid of Taiwan and would not allow Taiwan to be taken by China by force. And he wouldn't even commit to that. I mean, these are very dangerous territories. What I don't understand, I'm wondering if you've got any insight on this, is why Donald Trump can be so clear and firm on Israel, so clear about the rights and wrongs and the national interests of America and indeed Western civilization's interest in that war, and yet he doesn't see it in Ukraine, and apparently doesn't even see it in the potential war in Taiwan.
I think it's very simple. He works out who his allies and friends are, what's beneficial for the domestic audience. Everything he does is about supporting America and the American people. And there's absolute passion in America, and we know that you've been there many times, in making sure that the state of Israel is supported in its hour of need. And that goes without saying. And so supporting Netanyahu, supporting what's going on there, that's going to take place. Ukraine, I'm afraid we're seeing this, and I stand corrected, that we're more likely to see greater respect yielded to President Putin than afraid to President Zelensky. That we're more likely to see now a trade deal with Russia, because it benefits America to some degree, but also means that Europe, not an interest for America, doesn't really concern us. For a long time now, Trump has always believed that we've, for too long, benefited from the top cover of American security. To some degree, he's correct there. But ultimately, the danger of this is the bigger challenge that we're going to face in this century is the almighty clash between China's direction of travel, and America, and indeed the West. Surely it's better to have Europe and America on the same page rather than Europe distracted by, I'm afraid, a greater conflict with Russia, because there's less stress. Putin will not stop at Ukraine.
But it is very strange, and again, Donald Trump often does this. He seems to be able to hold two ideas in his head at the same time. So at one point he's saying Russia's not the aggressor, Vladimir Putin's his friend, Ukraine, well, it's all their fault, and if they hadn't been looking to NATO and the EU, none of this would have happened. Poor old Putin having no choice but to defend himself against this. And at the same time saying, hey, Europe, you're not defending yourself, you need to build up, you need to double. He's called 5% of GDP to be spent on defence, because you need to protect yourselves in Europe against the aggressor in Europe. Well, who does he think the aggressor is? Is it Iceland? I'm sorry, is it Libya coming to attack across the Med? No, the only aggressor that Europe faces is Russia. So why is he, at one point he seems to think that Russia is the victim, and the next Russia is the aggressor? I mean, how can both be true at the same time?
Because I don't think we are fully appreciating where the Trump doctrine, if I can give it a label, is actually going. And I could be wrong about this, but we need to prepare for all scenarios. That Trump and his administration now see a chaotic world, no interest in repairing the ailing rules-based order, but allowing a new world order where each superpower has their own regional influence. And that allows Russia the space then to claim Ukraine, whether it's partial in the Donbass or the rest of it. And then it grants license to America to then claim Canada, Panama, Greenland. These are areas that America's interests. What goes on in the South China Sea, that's up to China. It's like there are alpha males or big beasts in a jungle now, and everybody can respect everybody else, but don't engage in each other's territory. I could be wrong on this, but picking up the pieces, having visited the Munich Security Conference, just come back from Ukraine, that's, I'm afraid, where currently I think things are going.
Yeah, well, I have to say I've long thought, and you and I have discussed so many times on my show, how much Britain and the European Union need to up their game on their defence spending. Donald Trump called it, 8 years ago, and he was right then and he's right now. I've got so much more I want to talk to you about, including the Chagos, Ukraine deal, all of that. But I just want to bring in some breaking news in the last few moments while you were speaking. The former Labour MP, still sitting as an independent MP, Mike Amesbury, he's the MP for Runcorn. He pleaded guilty in December to repeatedly punching a man down to the ground, a constituent in his Runcorn constituency, in a drunken fight. He was sentenced earlier this week to 10 weeks behind bars. He's just following an appeal at Chester Crown Court in the last few minutes. He has had that 10-week prison sentence for assault suspended for 2 years. Your reaction to that, Tobias, as a former MP yourself, I mean, lots of people expected that he was going to be facing a recall petition. I don't know whether under the terms of the Recall Act, I can't recall the exact terms, whether or not he'd still face that, given the sentence he's been given. Certainly there was a lot of upset that he would carry on receiving his salary while he was behind bars for 10 weeks, unable to actually do the job of being an MP. But it is extraordinary. When we talk about two-tier justice, we've got people who've written things on Facebook and other social media sites who've been given, 2-year sentences behind bars. He's not even going to serve a day behind bars for repeatedly, drunkenly, unprovoked punching a constituent in the street. It's on video. There are witnesses. He had to be stopped. Otherwise, he would have carried on punching the man. He could have had to sustain serious injury or death. And he's not going to face
discussion with you. We're not attracting the brightest and the best to step into public life for many, many reasons. But if MPs who cross the line, who break the law, who end up getting a sentence or indeed a criminal record, don't step back straight away, what does that say about our parliamentary system? I think he should have done the honourable thing straight away of stepping back, rather than waiting for this moment now. It's taken far too long.
He knew he'd done it. It wasn't a question of it wasn't me, it was someone else, or I didn't touch him. Well, let's say I just checked under parliamentary rules, by-election of a Westminster seat can be forced. We know of the recall petition if 10% of registered voters in a constituency call for there to be a recall, and he could stand again, but he wouldn't be the Labour candidate. Won more than 50% of the vote at the last election, very strong Labour seat. But basically, if he's jailed or given a suspended jail sentence, so this still means there still very likely will be, I think there'll be even more outrage now. He'll face a recall petition. Possibility, of course, Reform Party got 18% in the vote in that constituency, could well be seriously vying Labour for that seat.
Yeah, it goes back to my point. I thought there were more robust rules in place that if you did somehow break the law or shown to break the law, then you would lose your right to be a parliamentarian.
Yeah.
I hope Parliament now will then look at this case and have a more robust rules put in position that we more swiftly deal with these matters. The fact that we're discussing it now, how many months ago or years ago did this actually take place? It's dragging on, and that just diminishes and actually damages the reputation of Parliament at such a critical time when, as I say, that's the gene pool of talent, Parliament, that we get ministers and indeed prime ministers from. And if people are distracted from even stepping forward, that doesn't bode well for British leadership on the international stage.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your comments on that. Let's go back to another big issue. Okay, I want to talk about Ukraine first and then the Chagos Islands. But in terms of what we might get in terms of a deal for Ukraine, we know Zelensky is going to visit tomorrow, Friday, to the White House. That is the plan. And then there's going to be a meeting in London with European leaders, with Starmer and Zelensky, hopefully to take some sort of peace plan forward. But again, we don't know yet if there seems not to be any sort of security guarantee from the US. British, French and other European nations have said, look, we will offer peacekeeping troops, but we need a US backstop. We need a guarantee the US, because basically they're the only ones, which is quite mad in itself, but they're the only ones with the military might to possibly offer that proper deterrent to Russia to not take any more land in Ukraine. Do you think there's any likelihood we will see some sort of guarantee from the United States? I know, as I say, you've been in talks with a lot of people involved in this.
Yeah, this is the key question right now. I fear that Zelensky is only going to Washington, D.C. to look Putin in the eye and gauge better where the president is going in the longer term, rather than providing that support that you quite eloquently described, that backstop, if you like, to make sure if Russia were to do this again, America is there. Instead, Trump is focusing on the minerals deal itself. And that, I think, is a wake-up call to Europe. I would push back a bit on your thoughts to say we can't do this alone. There's a wake-up call I saw in Ukraine with a lot of leaders from right across Europe, including Britain, saying, do we risk the fact that we get almost a grubby deal that's sorted out between Putin and Trump that does allow Putin to claim a form of victory, rearm, regroup, and do this all again in a couple of years' time with a bigger war? Or do we dare to lean in and remove those ridiculous caveats, give Ukraine the necessary equipment so they can push Russia back? Militarily, we have the ability to do so, but we do need to increase defense spending. It's whether we have the political will. And that's the Cold War.
That's the key thing.
that I'm afraid has been missing in this entirety of our support for Ukraine.
But in the entire European banking system, there's apparently $200 billion worth of Russian frozen assets, basically controlled by previously controlled by the Russian leader, government, and indeed his acolytes. Why don't we just spend that money?
Because it's against international law. So if you do it, you need. Well,
so is invading a sovereign nation state.
Yeah, but then you're saying, okay, eye for an eye. That's the Mohammed rules, then, isn't it?
That's what happens in. No, it's not an eye for an eye, because taking basically dodgy, stolen Russian banking assets. I'm sorry, we know that it's all dodgy. We shouldn't have had it in our banking system. Taking that is not the equivalent to raping and murdering Ukrainian citizens.
Of course it's not. Of course it's not. I didn't mean to say that.
I know you didn't.
There are an awful lot of assets. Let me finish. Awful lot of assets from around the world that if you did this to Putin without, let's say, a UN resolution or without a confirmation from Europe, for example, as a whole, to say the context in which we're doing this is unprecedented and a one-off, I'm afraid there's an awful lot of money from some dictators, but authoritarian states that have put their money in banks across Europe that will then say, I will no longer do that.
Well, maybe we don't want their money.
Investment in Europe.
Maybe we don't want their money. Well, maybe the entire London banking system shouldn't be run on dodgy Russian and Arab money.
So where does that money then go? It then goes to Chinese banks, and the splintering in our world between two spheres of competing influence then continues. Big questions. You're absolutely right. But that's only one part and parcel. Let me finish. Only one part and parcel of our willingness to lean in and to defeat Russia. An important one, but let's not get bogged down in that aspect of it. Militarily, we have the might, the capability. It's the political will that I'm looking for. The leadership that's going to say, we stand behind Zelensky, we're not going to support Putin, let's put this fire out.
OK, let's finally just talk about Chagos Islands, because we understand from the Foreign Secretary David Lammy, who's going to be in the room in the White House when the Prime Minister and the President meet. Says that actually America have a veto on the Chagos Islands deal. It's been extraordinary, I think, in the last 24 hours, the refusal of both the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary to confirm that none of the money in this beefed up defence spending, whether it's $13.5 billion or $6 billion, is the reality of the extra funding to be spent, will be basically paid to Mauritius as part of the Chagos deal. The fact that they won't confirm that, it's an easy, no, of course it won't. There you are, end of discussion. The fact they won't confirm that tells us that some of that money is going as part of the Chagos deal. Do you expect that Donald Trump will veto that Chagos deal, and would that be a good thing?
I separate the two out, because I was based in Cyprus. The cost of that, the sovereign bases there, comes from the defence budget. So that stands to reason. The question is as to whether the deal that's on the table should be then revised, and I'd agree with that. Just to place into context this island, the importance of it, it's in this new era of insecurity, I'm pleased that we prompted an increase in defence spending. The strategic importance of this base cannot be overstated. Yep. It acts as a major logistics hub for both the US and the UK in supporting operations across the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And it's also the US bases at long-range bombers there, the B-1s, the B-2s, and so forth, satellite technology, tracking stations, and so on. Let's make sure that we get the deal that's required. Because of the changing scenario that we've just spent a number of minutes talking about, I hope we will sit down again and strike a better deal that'll serve the purposes of what we need for our defence in a very fast-changing world.
The deal is we keep the islands that we own. End of. So good to talk to you. We've covered a lot of ground there. Tobias Ellwood, thank you very much indeed for joining us, former Defence and Foreign Minister. Philip Ingram, I mean, so much to come back on. I'll get your thoughts on Mike Amesbury in a few moments, but just in terms of the international affairs.
Well, so much in there. There's two things that come out of that to me. One, the Russian economy is on the brink of collapse. If Europe took the gloves...
We've been told that for 2.5 years.
But it has. But what we've done is we've kept conditions on Ukraine using our weapons inside Russia to push it over the edge. If we took the gloves off and supplied Ukraine with non-US weapon systems and allow them to attack military targets and targets that influenced the war in Ukraine, the Russian economy would collapse relatively quickly. Donald Trump wouldn't be able to necessarily react to that and wouldn't be in a position to threaten Europe then to support Russia. He's not going to do that from a political perspective. The other bit is if Keir Starmer was actually a strong character, we were the closest military ally to America whenever America called the only Article 5 operation to support them into Afghanistan, the global war on terror.
We were there.
We were there. And what Keir Starmer
we actually helped persuade other countries.
Exactly. And what Keir Starmer should do is say, you're going to present us this big bill as to how much. Well, here's how much it's cost us. Are you going to pay us back? And he'd go in and play Trump, businessman to businessman, but he's not going to do that.
No, he's not going to do that. He really isn't. Just to get you up to date on that breaking news, former Labour MP Mike Amesbury, still an MP, still being paid by you and me, 91 grand a year. He was sentenced to 10 weeks behind bars and actually remanded in custody earlier this week after he pleaded guilty to assault, a drunken, repeated, vicious punching of a constituent in his Runcorn constituency. He was sentenced to 10 weeks, but it's been now, after an appeal at Chester Crown Court, suspended for 2 years. He very likely will still face that recall petition, and a by-election is likely to be called, but not a day behind, well, more than a couple of days behind bars for punching someone. Two-tier justice, anybody? God forbid he'd written a hurty tweet to the constituent rather than punched him. He'd probably still be behind bars for 20 years. I do not know what is going on in this country in terms of our judges and our magistrates, but something is going horribly wrong. 12:25 is the time we're going to get to your calls up next. Give us a call 0344 499 1000 to talk about, of course, particularly what you think is going to happen in the White House today, and what you want to happen and what you fear might happen. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
The Institute for Government has said that they estimate the cost to be 1.4 trillion. That will be an underestimate. McKinsey has said globally the cost will be something like 375 trillion. That's more than anything has ever cost. More than the Second World War cost economically, more than anything in our history in terms of policy would have cost. Since the policy's been called net zero, they're up by over 200%. If you read between the lines, and you mentioned it there with eating less meat, it means less everything.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining me. 12:27 is the time. I'm still, I have to say, absolutely flabbergasted by that ruling decision from the Chester Crown Court. The Honorary Recorder of Chester, Judge Stephen Everett, sitting with two magistrates, has ordered Mike Amesbury, the former, he's still the Runcorn and Helmsby MP, but he's now no longer sitting for Labour. He's ordered that he's allowed to walk free. He won his appeal against his 10-week jail sentence for punching a man in the street, which was handed to him on Monday. It's now suspended for 2 years. He will not be jailed unless he commits any more crimes within that time. He does have to carry out 200 hours of unpaid work, undertake a 12-month alcohol monitoring requirement, go on an anger management course, yeah, do you think, and carry out 20 days of rehabilitation work. But I mean, he pleaded guilty to repeatedly punching a constituent who had asked, it was the early hours of 26th of October, he'd asked him about a bridge closure. And he repeatedly, it's on video, repeatedly punching him. Now, whatever words were exchanged beforehand, you're still not allowed to punch people. I find this absolutely and utterly bewildering. I really do. Your thoughts are very welcome on this. 0244 499 1000. We're going to talk to Baroness Claire Fox about this in a few moments, along the many other topics, but I'd love to get her thoughts on that. Right now, let's go to the phone lines, talking about the White House, but Nigel is in London. Good afternoon to you, Nigel.
Afternoon. Well, I suppose, I hope you're well. I suppose that Keir Starmer must feel like the boy at the boarding school going to see the headmaster before his punishment, because in reality, I don't think he's got much to offer Trump.
No, indeed.
And I think what Keir Starmer failed to recognise, as of every other British Prime Minister before them, is that the Americans, and every American president, has one thing that they all share in common. They fight for the safety, the integrity, and the benefit of the American people.
Which they should. That's their job. That's what they're elected to do.
Absolutely. And it's a shame that our Prime Minister doesn't fight for the same for this country.
But I don't think that in basically, giving succor to Putin and indeed to Xi Jinping is in the interests of the American people.
Well, you say that, but I think in reality, his foreign aid budget, Trump, is immense. It dwarfs ours, and I think they want to find a way that is going to find an end to this awful war. That is going to. I don't care what any expert says. If it's not sorted out, then it's going to escalate and escalate and escalate. If we're not careful, we'll be drawn into a world war. And I think he's the only leader that I can think who's actually tried to do something about it. Can you? I mean, maybe.
Wait, hold on. No, I couldn't disagree with you more, Nigel. Honestly, okay. The war was launched, unprovoked war by Vladimir Putin.
Yes.
And, seizing Crimea in 2014, a few sanctions and a few UN motions, nothing actually done about it by anybody. He then decides to, he wants to take the whole of Ukraine, doesn't manage it. Thank God he got support and the amazing leadership of Zelensky in Ukraine and the amazing fighting ability and spirit of the Ukrainian people. If we do a deal and we allow Putin to get away with this now and keep that territory, he's just going to rearm, retreat. He's going to come back again for war. It's what he does. It's what Hitler did. It's what he's done. We've learned the lessons of history. If you want to avoid a world war, you have to deter aggressors.
Well, I see your point of view, but then does that mean that we have to have hundreds of thousands of more people dying? We have to be more aggressive towards Russia, which could escalate far more seriously.
No, we don't have to be aggressive towards Russia. We just make it clear. You don't get to, I don't think we should let them keep any territory they've taken, certainly since 2022. But even if there were a peace deal then, at that point, even that, it needs to be incontrovertible. One steel cap over a tiny bit of Ukrainian or any other Eastern European territory, that's it. It's all out war. Because that would deter Putin, because he's not an idiot.
Okay, but if an all-out war starts, and God forbid it should ever start in Europe, how can we possibly win it?
Well, how do you think we won the last one and the one before that?
But that was 70 years ago, Julia.
What's the difference? You think we wouldn't rearm? Of course we'd win it.
We've got an army which has got less people than...
We would have a much bigger armour very quickly, just like we did in the Second World War. I mean, again, I just think this fear of war... No, if you want to avoid war, you have to be willing and able to fight a war, and your adversaries to know that. That's how we got to the Cold War. There are things worth dying for.
I understand and accept your point of view about standing up to an aggressive bully, of course, but there has to be proportionality involved. And I don't think that we're in a position where we can actually win a war.
OK, so we'll just we'll let Russia take Ukraine. Where else? Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland. Where else? Germany? Where else? If you don't want to go to war, where else are you going to allow Putin to invade?
I see your point of view.
No, answer the question. You don't want to go to war. You don't want those people to die. The only way for that to happen is for us not to stand up to Putin. So, OK, so how much Eastern European territory are you willing to give up?
Well, I don't want to give up any European territory.
Then you might have to. Then we might have to go to war.
Well, that would be a terrible thing.
Would it be more or less terrible than allowing a murderous, evil dictator like Putin to amass more territory? And seize a democratic nation states.
It would be terribly grim to go to war.
Which would be worse?
Which would be worse? It's a very good question.
That's the choice we make.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as black and white as what you're saying.
No, it is. No, it really is that black and white.
Do you think so?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think. Well, look, Nigel, call me again. We've got more time. Thank you so much. We've always loved talking to you. Philip Ingram, your response to that?
Yeah, no, fantastic. Two things will bring out. The first one is that wars are not won purely on the tactical battle. Russia is on the point of collapse. That's hitting out at the operational level.
We're constantly told them the state of collapse, but actually, we're not buying their gas and oil anymore. They're selling it to India, and then we're buying it from India. Come on.
No, it's not that. It's their ability to continue to maintain the support for the tactical battle.
40% of government spending is now on the war.
So they can't manufacture munitions. If they can't get them in from North Korea, they can't get the munitions to the front lines. They can't continue to do that. That's That's the bit that you attack. That's the bit which is going to collapse. That's what will stop the war. And the other thing that Nigel is saying, I hear what he's saying about the casualties now, but if Putin is allowed to rearm, re-equip, and then reset and come back in 5 years' time, the casualties are going to be 10 times the casualties there are now. You have to finish it today to then get a lasting peace through diplomacy that doesn't lead to another conflict. If you're just pushing it off into the future, it's going to cost more and more and more in money and in lives.
Very quick call from Herbie, in Harrow, got that wrong. Herbie, what do you want to say, my love?
I wish I was a fly on the wall that's got now that meeting this afternoon.
Oh yeah, I know. when it's just the two men without the cameras present. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, lovely. I'd love to, because Trump has got the Trump card. Excuse my pun. He's holding the Trump card. I mean to say he's doing what he wants to do, and I'm sure he's going to say to Starmer, "Listen, you're going to start doing things my way, otherwise you're going to get nothing." He's going to be that determined. You can see it coming. Starmer hasn't got a leg to stand on because Starmer and Lammy, insulted Trump, and he ain't going to forgive him for that.
No, there does appear to be a bit of an issue there. They should have played a longer game on that front, thinking we might be in office one day. Do you think there's going to be a guarantee for Ukraine? Do you think we're going to get anything that we want?
It's very hard to say because Ukraine, unfortunately, the minerals that Trump's after, Russia's got hold of. They're holding the Trump card as well at the moment as regarding what he wants. Yeah. And I don't know how they're going to resolve that. Yeah. Because, again, if people can't see what's happening, if Russia's got these minerals that the world needs, China's got a lot of the minerals and things already around the world. Yeah. So what have we got? We've got nothing. We've got appeasement to Russia and appeasement to China, appeasement to Iran and appeasement to North Korea. So where do we stand?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Herbie, thank you so much. I appreciate that call. Up next, going to take a quick break. Going to talk to the brilliant, the wonderful Baroness Claire Fox about a whole load of stories that are in the news. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. 12:37 is the time. I'm going to go straight to Baroness Claire Fox, who's very patiently waiting on the line right now for us. She's an independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. Baroness Fox, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you, Julia.
Really appreciate you. There's lots more to talk to you about, but can I just get a reaction to the news we've had in the last half hour that Mike Amesbury, the was Labour MP, still sitting as an independent, who was pleaded guilty to assaulting a constituent early hours of the morning, very drunkenly, repeatedly punching him in the face. It's all on video. There's no debate about it. Sentenced earlier this week to just 10 weeks behind bars. I think many of us thought 10 weeks behind bars for that sort of unprovoked assault quite astonishing. He is now, extraordinarily, in the last 40 minutes or so, been allowed to have that on appeal, that sentence suspended for 2 years. Got to do community service and that, but he's not going to serve a day behind bars. What do you make of that when there are people last summer who wrote tweets which apparently the police thought were a bit hurty? I'm not talking about the streets threatening people's lives or calling for, burning of asylum hostels or the like after the Southport attack, but people who wrote tweets serving not just months but even years behind bars when an MP who punched a constituent on video doesn't serve a single day.
I think that's the problem with this sentence, is it really brings into discredit the judicial criminal justice system, doesn't it? Because it's that comparison which all of us think of. It's not that I think oh, Mike Gainsbury needs to go to prison. It's that what he did was a physical act of violence, and the fact that he managed to get off from prison term in comparison with, we now know, increasing numbers who are put in prison for speech crimes. That is the bit that is so irritating. And of course, people will think it's because he's an MP. It was an act of violence. You can have an argument about sentencing rules, but what you certainly do feel is, oh my God, it's two-tier justice again. And I'm afraid that what happens then is people lose confidence in the ability of the criminal justice system to give out fairly punishment, and it depends who you are, what the political context is, and so on.
And that's
so
literally the basic principle, every basic principle of justice, which is that it should be equal. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. There might be extenuating circumstances, there might be mitigating something, there might be whatever, aggravating circumstances, but the man was caught on video drunkenly, repeatedly punching a constituent. I don't know how if that doesn't get you, a trip to jail, I don't know what does.
Exactly. And I mean, we know there's a prison crisis, but it's precisely in the context of that prison crisis that some very erratic decisions are being made, which is why lock people up for speech crimes when they haven't committed an act of violence. But also, I always go on about the prisoners on indefinite sentences, the IPP prisoners, on an abolished sentence, nearly 3,000 of them, who were, one that I wrote about or spoke about last week, did a robbery crime of a mobile phone 13 years ago, got a 2-year tariff, and he's still inside indefinitely. So it's the irrationality and the unfairness that will make people cynical. And what we don't need, by the way, is a nation and a public who become cynical about criminal justice.
Absolutely.
I want people to understand the law is the law, and if you break it, you will be put in prison or so on. Well, you can't make sense of this. It doesn't work for me.
Exactly, and justice does have to be blind. Well, let's talk about something going on in Scotland, where the SNP leadership may be quite happy, as we know, under their laws to lock you and me up for saying outrageously offensive and terrible criminal things like that a trans woman is not a woman, a trans woman is a man, and that men can't become women. And we also don't want them in our prison cells, should we end up in prison, even though that's still the case in Scotland. I believe there are still 2 men in England who are in women's prison cells. There's a court case involving one at the current time, where she's the one who's being tried for apparently, not abusing him by the fact she won't use his pronouns. Just extraordinary situation. But latest madness from the SNP. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney, he has backed the rights of trans people who self-identify to use women's toilets and changing rooms. So he's basically saying men who identify as trans, who simply say, I believe I'm a woman this Thursday afternoon, should be allowed to enter our hard-won, legally protected single-sex spaces. What do you make of this?
It's absolutely shocking that John Swinney can be such a numpty. The SNP are utter mad. I mean, they've lost a leader over this. They've practically destroyed Scottish nationalism. They're so discredited around the issue of self-ID in relation to gender. But this is in the context of the heroic fight by Nurse Peggy to simply get change. And nurses have to get change all the time, don't they? That's the nature of the job. And Nurse Peggy says, I don't want to share my changing room with a doctor who is male, biologically male, but identifies as a woman. And there's now a big employment tribunal. And can you consider this? These are progressives, allegedly, in the SNP. And they are the ones who would say, we must protect women from all potential violence at any given time. These are the ones who will say, health workers, nurses are heroic, and you're not allowed to criticise them even when sometimes criticism is due. But oh no, in this instance, they have sided with a doctor who, by the way, doesn't need to get changed as it goes, but entering into a female space and getting changed, or more appropriately, while that nurse is getting changed, a male is there to look.
Well, and she said he repeatedly stared at her as well. Very intimidating.
Exactly. It's all a bit dodgy before you get there, but as a point of principle, the public in Scotland are outraged by this, and they assume that we'll all support the nurse. But the SNP can't bring themselves but to repeat and repeat and repeat ad nauseum the ideology of trans ideology that refuses to acknowledge women's rights in this space. one thing I would like to say, because I think it is important, that I'm delighted that Labour representatives in the Scottish Parliament have now said we made a terrible mistake when we introduced gender self-ID in the Scottish Parliament. I love a mea culpa like everyone, but let's pretend that they weren't well informed at the time when Labour led the charge in terms of demonising anybody who argued against this. They refused to take evidence from women's rights organisations like For Women Scotland, like Sex Matters and LGBT Alliance and so on. They refused all that. In fact, they went along with demonising them as bigots. So I'm delighted Labour have entered the fold and now say we made a mistake. But they should now, if they really mean that, be absolutely ardent campaigners the other way and absolutely humiliate the Essex.
That's the thing, is I don't believe any of them really believe that a man can become a woman or the so-called identify. We say trans women, let's use the correct term, a trans-identifying man. Just use the correct, let's stop using the phrase trans women, because that's what confuses people. I don't believe they really believe they become women. The people just pretend this because they virtue signal at their North London dinner parties or their their Edinburgh dinner parties, I don't know. But bearing in mind that Labour is still led by a man who currently in Washington who claims to believe that 0.1% of women in this country do have a penis. I mean, there is an insanity here, and until that is ended, people have to say, no, that's wrong, I don't believe that, I was wrong to say that. I still can't take these people seriously. What did you make of, Donald Trump? He's got a lot of faults. My God, I'm critical of him over Ukraine and many other things, but he's been an absolute joy to watch over things like women's sport, women's safe spaces. Your passport has to say male or female. That's it. End of discussion. You're one or the other, and it's what you biologically are, not what you claim to be on a Thursday afternoon. This is bringing sanity back. How hopeful are you that we're always downstream of American cultural change? Do you think that will bring some sanity here, or are they going to double down?
So I think the thing to note is that it's very disconcerting when Donald Trump, not a man I admire hugely on a range of things, when he was bringing out those executive orders, I mean, I was literally kind of fist pumping and cheering, protecting women's sports. And you think it's got so ludicrous that we're in a country that we look on enviously as someone stating the absolute bleeding obvious, which is we know what the difference between a woman is and a man is, and we're going to protect women's rights. And the fact that you can't safely say that the UK Labour Party, who run the country, would guarantee those rights, or that in Scotland we have a leadership that won't, or indeed in Wales, etc. And that this is, by the way, institutionally in every nook and cranny. So to answer your question, that is the problem. The problem is, unless there is an absolute determined attempt, a kind of Doge-like or executive order-like intervention by our political leaders or by our political elite. The problem is that institutionally, the NHS, the civil service, the education system is actually embraced this and has brought it into their own rulemaking. So we need far more clarity. I think it's incredible, by the way, that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission actually went to Scotland to explain to this John Swinney what the law was on this, and they still said, oh yes, but I have to say that a trans woman is a woman because otherwise I'll fall out with my hardcore supporters. They are incapable of understanding the popular support for this, which is why, by the way, Donald Trump, for all his faults, gained millions and millions of votes of ordinary working people, particularly working women, who said, at least I know that they will protect our children from sharing, facilities with our little girls with boys and our female athletes with men. And actually, that alone was enough to get him a huge swathe of support.
Absolutely. And I've always said in my, for elections here, this is a deal breaker for me. You're either sane or you're not. It's as simple as that. Baroness Claire Fox, always a voice of sanity and common sense, independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Philip Ingram, your reaction to that?
Well, doesn't she talk an awful lot of common sense?
She always does. She's brilliant.
But isn't it really sad that we are looking at Trump with his background and praising him for applying common sense this, and we're looking at our politicians going, but you're not doing it.
But it's great on some things. I always said this before the election, and then I just think completely wrong on other things. It's very difficult. There's a lot of politicians these days, isn't it? Anyway, coming up, we're going to find out now how you could be with a chance of winning £25,000.
Time's running out to get involved in our 25 grand competition. Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win this life-changing amount of money for 2025. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that, but time is running out. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, good luck, everyone, in that. Right, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about something very interesting. Given that we've got Donald Trump very keen on rare earth minerals from Ukraine, big issue, very big part of whatever the future world wars are going to be about, folks. It's very interesting that we have seen a space probe called Odin embarking on a mission to scout out getting rare earth minerals from asteroids. We're going to be talking to the brilliant space commentator Andy Lound about the significance of that up next. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
It feels like there's something else going on, and it's not genuinely about entertainment, and it's not genuinely about like an appropriate storyline, if it is all over our soaps, which I suspect it is. And then when it's sort of in somewhere like CBeebies, you just think, well, this is an agenda, and what is your agenda? Is it sort of sexualization? Is it to totally undermine women? Whatever it is, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever on a CBeebies website.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up to 12:52. Philip Ingram's still with me. Delighted to be joined now by space commentator Andy Lound to talk about a space probe called Odin. It's been launched on Elon Musk's SpaceX rocket, and it's embarking on a very special mission. Andy, tell us what it's going to do.
Yes, hi. Yes, this is a private company launch, sending an asteroid to, sending a spacecraft to an asteroid in order to photograph the asteroid and analyse what it's actually made out of. Hopefully it's going to be made out of material which is important. They think there could be platinum there, possibly things like iridium and so on. In other words, what we call rare earth metals, metals which are essential for industry, for our computer tech industry, for scanners, things for hospitals, things like that, very important materials. Because, of course, getting access to this material on Earth is becoming more difficult. The material is here on Earth, but it's getting harder to actually get access to them. They're much deeper into the Earth's surface, or they're possibly under the oceans. And thanks to SpaceX, it's actually becoming cheaper now to launch vehicles to get spacecraft to asteroids, for the possibility of prospecting asteroids to get this material back to Earth. And if this mission is successful and they do find the materials they want there, the next stage will be to send a spacecraft to actually land on the asteroid and look at the possibilities how they can actually extract this
so
material.
This is very long-term prospect, but again, these are, as you say, rare earth metals and minerals that are absolutely vital to virtually all of our technology, and again, very expensive, largely, by the way, also controlled by China. Again, this always ties in with military and economic power as well. But I mean, how small or big is this asteroid? Presumably it has to be of decent size, because we wouldn't be able to see or know about it otherwise. How far away is it, and how long will any mission take to get there?
This mission's going to take quite a long time, several months to get there. It's 1 million miles away, which is where it's going to dock with it. It's in a relatively stable orbit, so we know its orbit quite well. And the asteroid itself is about 1 mile across or something, so it's a relatively small object to actually get to and to dock with and to examine. But the small ones are usually the ones we can actually work with quite well, because their orbits, things called Apollo asteroids, and they cross Earth's orbit as they orbit the sun, so we can actually track these very well.
So this is something, it's not something that's just sort of flying by at a great rate, it's got an orbit around the sun.
Orbit around the sun, it's an orbit around the sun. We're in stable orbit, so we can actually constantly go backwards and forwards to them once we actually identify what
and but it's only 1 mile long. I mean, again, I suppose, you try with one asteroid and then there'll be bigger asteroids you can get more from.
Yeah, there's all sizes.
But again, are you saying that this asteroid may well be, as many of these asteroids are, just made up, like almost not just having traces, but just entirely of these rare metals, and in terms of how much more these metals or minerals exist on these on this asteroid or any other compared to what we've got on Earth that we can access, are we talking about game-changing levels?
Yes,
huge amounts.
Let's take an example of nickel iron. Nickel iron is absolutely vital on this planet. Here's a nickel iron meteorite which came from an asteroid which crashed onto the Earth. Psyche, which is an asteroid which NASA are actually sending a spacecraft to survey, looks like it possibly could contain enough nickel alloy that we could mine, which would suit all human needs for several million years.
Right. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of
it out there. And of course,
if this is also important, why is it that NASA isn't doing this? Why is it left to private companies to do this?
Couple of reasons for that. NASA, I've sent a spacecraft to Psyche to study that, but the cost of launching into space now has become so low, thanks to the driving forces of Elon Musk, that can get prices low. That can
because the rocket isn't destroyed.
Because and it's not state funded, which can bring. I mean, bearing in mind his development program of $5 billion for SpaceX is costing less than it's building us to build a railway between London and Birmingham. Think of that.
It is a very fair point.
By
a long way.
Bring those costs down in the private sector is what's making this now. And you need to make that, I think it's a 30%. You need to look at a return of 30%. And it's reaching the point now where actually
worthwhile.
It's going to be worth
it. But this is high risk, isn't it? I mean, in terms of the success, the chances of success, being able to do this. And the whole time you're talking, I'm picturing, although it's a different plot line, Armageddon, with Bruce Willis, where they actually try to put a nuclear weapon into a passing asteroid. Oh, he's not happy. He's not happy with Hollywood right now. But and that's the plan. But again, it's still, nevertheless, using expert drillers from Earth to go into an asteroid, but this time not to blow it up and then die, but to save humanity, but to extract it to actually help humanity in a different way.
Oh yeah.
But this is high risk. So the companies who do this, are these, I suppose it's no different to putting billions into AI or something. This is high risk, but the rewards are huge.
Yeah, it's the same with drilling for oil. I mean, the money that's spent for drilling for oil in new areas is phenomenal. But if they hit the right seam and it comes off, all that money comes flooding back.
So if you get the right asteroid and it comes off.
Yeah, it's the same principle.
And can you tell from looking at an asteroid what it might be made of, or do you have to get to
Yes, you get a rough idea by looking at it, the light that actually comes from it. So you can get some rough idea. Looking at its mass gives you an idea whether it's light, whether it's rocky, whether it's metallic or not. So you can get a rough idea. So you target those asteroids.
So when people say like, space exploration, all this money being spent, again, it's private companies, not our taxpayers' money, nothing to do with us. But people say, what's the benefit for us? There's a clear benefit for us.
Yeah. Well, it's very important because we have an issue of cobalt, for instance, on Earth. We use cobalt, for instance, in scanners, which are used for body scanners and things like that on Earth. And there's a shortage of cobalt, but there's cobalt going to be accessible on asteroids and things like that. We need the raw materials to actually keep our industry actually going down here. And that's why China state is funding a lot of money into their space program, because they're after raw materials too.
Wow.
Already, I mean, you quoted a film. Moon 02, 1969. That's the film to look at, and that was about mining on the moon.
Right.
And Warren Mitchell crashing an asteroid on the moon.
I was only a year old, so I don't remember that one. But Andy Loud, it's always, you know me, I'm always very, very happy when you're happy about something. Space commentator Andy Loud. Philip Ingram, I love this story.
I do. I love space. As I said, I was the youngest ever member of the Irish Astronomical Association at the age of 9. But
were you a little nerd?
I was. As you start to develop, the technologies to get out to do this, there's so many spin-off technologies that come and help us across the world as well.
I'm all in favour of all space exploration. It is the future.
And if it's not paid for by the taxpayer, even better.
Even better, absolutely. Ian Collins, what do you make?
I actually thought Philip was going to say I was the first Irish astronaut there for a second.
I have been called a space cadet.
No, he probably was, but he can't tell us because then he'd have to kill us.
Of course, yeah, the secret mission that no one ever heard about.
Keep it quiet, Ian. I can't believe you brought that up on air.